I love
I
how this
I
podcast is
guess
going. It's
I
going great so
guess.
far.
We're really hitting
Seems like it
cadence
might be a
here.
slow one, gentlemen.
Yeah, we're firing on all cylinders,
Yeah.
boys.
Well, some of
We're all
us
like
it's
we're all kind of tired and
right
fucked up.
before
We're like,
right before bed, right after waking up,
puppies all
but
around.
we made it here.
I just got out of the
So how we
pool with the
doing?
kids. Bro, what is it about being in the pool? It like zaps your energy. It's like the sun and I don't know. But
I
yeah,
was at the
I'm
beach
wrecked
with
too.
the kids last week. Same thing. Like the sun just absolutely fucks
Yeah.
us up. It's like 2 hours
Yeah.
there, and it's like you're exercising the whole day. It's weird.
But it's such
That's
a
right,
nice
man.
tired. You get home
It
afterwards, your skin
is.
is sun
Yeah.
kissed, and you got that saltiness on you, and you're just like,
Yeah,
put
yeah.
on some sweatpants and chill.
Feel like you just want to take a nap,
Yeah. Well, like I just said, I can't believe I always say this, I know, but it's been half a year since we've done one of these. In the past we were like, yeah, let's do it once a month. These are great. And then, life just happens, and here we are on a cadence of
It feels like
two to
it feels
three a
like
year,
time is
probably.
really accelerating. Yeah,
Yeah.
like really fast. I mean, it was just the bull run in 2021, and then we went through a whole bear market. Now, boom, we're shot out the other side of it. We're going into another bull run again. You know what I mean?
No, the bull run's over, bro. Done. That was it.
Oh yeah,
I hope you enjoyed it.
All the people who picked the wrong shit coins, all the people who picked the wrong shit coins and meme coins, they desperately want it to be over. It's like, no, you just lost a bunch of money. You just pissed it down the toilet. Like that's what happened. You know what I mean? Bull run's not over. Not even close. The
Yeah.
Dow just hit 40,000. You know what I mean? By the way, where do all these bears go, man? All these people who were like, sell it all. Great Depression 2.0. Where are those fuckers? Bitcoin's all-time high. Dow's 40,000. You know what I mean? We're about to get Trump back in office. Let's go. Come on. Couldn't be more bullish.
Good old Trump.
Before I comment, is my mic coming through okay? Is the volume good?
Sound good, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's like people go away once their midterm prediction turns out not to be the case, and then they come back when there's a glimmer of light, and then they change their thesis, and then they're repping another thesis, and it's all for the clicks and the likes, basically. But here we are.
You guys, John, your video
Never wavering.
It's intellectual TA, Oh, John's video and audio's off.
for me at least. I don't know if that's for you guys too.
Might just be good.
Little bit.
General latency.
Whatever. I don't know how to fix it at this point, so we'll see if it corrects itself. Man, I know this is kind of left field, but speaking of bull market things and just general crypto insanity, I've been like not on Twitter at all. The last week I didn't even like check it, but I haven't been posting much and stuff. But I finally listened to that Junseth call, like social engineering call thing. Wasn't that wild?
Yeah. Fucking crazy, man.
But I'm sure it's legit, right? Because he's not gonna put something fake out. It's just amazing how open the dude was, right? It was just like, oh, you want to talk about the scam?
Yeah, I know a bit about.
Oh, it's not legit.
It's a pretty basic social engineering scam where have you been getting these text messages that say like there's been a withdrawal from your Coinbase account, your Kraken account, or your whatever? Have you gotten any of these? And then they say press 1 if you didn't initiate this withdrawal or whatever. So if you press 1, they know that you're an idiot who's easy to social engineer, and then they call you on the phone and talk sweet nothings in your ear and convince you to switch your Google password to something that they can control. Then they get access to your Google 2FA. Then they can hack into all of your exchange accounts. Even if you don't have cryptocurrency on your exchange account, they can pull money from your linked bank account, buy cryptocurrency, and then abscond with it. So yeah, this has been going on for a long time, and there's like technical ways to protect yourself and whatever. But this one, Junseth had been, intercepting these phone calls for months because he was trying to get an interview like this. And finally, he got one of these guys who was like a chatty Cathy who was willing to sit on the phone for 30 minutes and basically just tell him a bunch of shit. And there was for anybody who hasn't heard the interview, this kid is he's 18 or 19. He says he's 17, but I don't believe that. Because he at one point he says him and all his friends moved to LA and they go to the clubs and they drive a McLaren, and that's more believable to me. And so anyway, basically this kid is lonely. He's looking for somebody to talk to. And he just starts bragging to Junseth about all the people that they're stealing from, and he's like, dude, it's so easy. I just steal from this guy, steal from that guy. I make like 10, 20, 30, $40,000 a day doing this. We have a Swan customer on the hook for 1.2 million. And the minute I heard that, I'm listening to the interview right away. I fucking call Corey Clipstein because I have his number like personally, and I'm like, Corey, go to the time stamp in this video and listen to this. There's a fucking $1.2 million withdrawal that is maybe happening, maybe not. I don't know. And Corey is like, okay, I'm right on it. He goes into his system. He says the Swan guy's already caught it, meaning it was real. That was a real $1.2 million withdrawal. So if that part of the story is real, the $1 million thing, the rest of the phone call is probably real also. And dude, these kids are just out here like acting with impunity. There's like so many like facets to this story. It's like it highlights self-custody, it highlights the moral decay and nihilism of our society and our youth. It highlights like a bunch of OPSEC best practices. It highlights like KYC vulnerabilities. Like there's so many like interesting touch points in the story. And yeah, it's like a fucking fascinating interview. For anybody who hasn't heard it, I think Junseth is going to take it on Peter McCormick's show, so you'll be able to hear it on What Bitcoin Did. And there's a link floating around out there on Twitter. But yeah, dude, fucking crazy story, the whole thing.
I haven't listened to it. It's been on my to-do list, but it's kind of interesting. I talked to an OPSEC friend recently who, because like this is what he does. He had a pretty similar conversation a few months back where scammers were trying to get him. He kept having conversations with them, and he was getting kind of jovial with them and kind of just like flipping the script a bit. And eventually, like one of the higher ups called him and like got more intimidating, and it was just really interesting because from their vantage point, like they're kind of captured, like they're already into the life of crime and doing it, and like they're this deep, so why not just like keep going deeper, right? Like who's going to catch them at this point? If they do get caught, they're in deep shit. Like it's pretty interesting to hear that from another vantage point. So I look forward to listening to that.
But Eric, it made me think of you a little bit, right? Because you're always talking about the banality of evil. I can't remember who like does all the writing on that, but like you listen to this kid, and there was a part where Junseth asked him like, "Don't you feel bad about it?" And then it kind of like there was like some issue with the audio, or like the kid he started to say like, "Yeah, I kind of like I'm starting to feel bad about it," and then he was going to explain a bit more, and then it like cut out and came back later, and they were discussing something else. But it's like the degree of the lack of like qualms that this kid has about what he's doing, like you can hear in his voice, like he's just so nonchalant about it, and it's just so crazy to listen to because he's stealing people's life savings daily and just spending it on I'm sure they're saving some, but like you said, they're talking about bottles at the club and nice cars and fancy hotel rooms, and it's wild. And think about how many people that gets, like think of all the, our parents' generation, like that would get the vast majority of them would fall for something like that because they think, oh, like Google's calling me. They're trying to make sure my account's as secure as it can be. Okay. Like, what do you want me to do? I don't know about this stuff. So you just tell me. And then, 20 minutes later, your life savings is gone.
Yeah.
If you held it on exchange, which is obviously the lesson. But
I mean, like
HODL frozen.
Is this any better right now? Was I breaking up there?
Yeah,
you seem better now.
Actually, like the
cool.
thing that surprises me the most about the social engineering thing is that like this all of this shit was going on when I was at Coinbase 10 years ago, and that like it's all the same thing. And it's kind of interesting because like social engineering is unequivocally the most powerful methodology. And so like it's not anything new though. It's just scamming in this kind of technical form now. And I think it's
that's what the kid said.
Because
he was like
that
people are giving us their stuff. So like the crime is relative, like it's hard to, like it's misrepresenting and stuff, but they're kind of insulated because like they're just convincing people to give them stuff.
Well, it's kind of like drone bombing from a facility in Arizona, like brown kids that are halfway around the world that you don't even see. Like how could you feel responsible for killing somebody when you're just pushing buttons on a video game, right? You're not really stealing somebody's life savings when you're just pressing buttons, right?
I think he said that. I think
I haven't watched it. Like, what are they actually doing? Just stealing people's exchange credentials, or like what's the?
Yeah, essentially, like they're getting into your Google account, and then they are, they're social engineering. So like sometimes they're getting into your Google account, they're having you change your 2FA so that they can get into your exchange account. Sometimes they're finding out that you're a cryptocurrency holder and you've made a purchase from Ledger or Trezor or whatever, and they call up from as they are Ledger or Trezor or whatever, and then they convince you to give them their seed phrases by, connecting your device to a fake website that looks exactly like Ledger or Trezor or whatever, and they sound very official on the phone, and they convince you, and they, it's the levers of fear and greed. They prey on your psychology in a moment of desperation or weakness. And then, even people who are relatively sophisticated can make mistakes like this. Like me personally, I've like adopted this stance of like, I just don't answer my phone for people I don't know, like ever.
Yeah.
I've been doing that for
Me
I'm
neither.
not going to answer a random phone call in the year 2024. Like, no thanks. Fuck off. I'll listen to your shitty voicemail.
Same thing with either with a voicemail or a phone call. It's like, hi, I'm from the FBI. Like, are you Eric
Yeah.
Kaysen? Like, yeah. They're like, is this where you live at? Uh-huh. Well, okay, like we need you to know that your dog was lit on fire and we need you to come in to talk about it. Like with my dog who lives at my address here, they're like, yes, can you re-verify that? And you're like, yeah. Okay, and this is your first dog, right? It would be the first name of the dog. Yes, okay. And your date of birth. Well, and like most people give it out because they're panicked. And like I have a lot of empathy for it. At first I thought like this is stupid, but like it's really ironic that like you initiate robbing somebody of their life savings by telling you that they're being robbed of their life savings, and like that sort of goes to show where the vulnerability itself is. Yeah, more and more like I'm leaning back on that. Like we now live in a world where it's like you either know and understand how this technology works or it controls you. Like those are the only two options. And anybody who just wants to be like, oh, I just don't use the internet, like you're absolutely fucked. Now you just don't have any control over it. And it's pretty scary because
Think about if
I thought the optionality was available.
Think about if you are a person who is going to be a just widespread broad scale user of an LLM, right? And like at some point in the future, like these probably will eat Google and search and all that, and you don't know that it has bias, right? And you don't know the types of biases that it has because you're not paying attention to that conversation on like Twitter and elsewhere, and you're not seeing the sorts of parameters that go into these things. You're just gonna be brainwashed, and it's just that simple, and you're not even gonna know that you're being brainwashed.
Which is
It's
the
really
case now. So with social media, it's just like times 100 basically, which is why I think all of this is going to necessarily or push at least people that care or at least somewhat aware of the dangers or the risks to self-hosted everything, right? You're going to have your own self-hosted LLM, and you're going to end up self-hosting a lot of services because the corruption and the manipulation and the data theft and everything is just going to be so rampant that like it's like you have to have it under your own exclusive control or you're going to be owned in various ways.
But that's
I
like
think there's actually
a declaration of individual civil war, because like it's clear with these legal decrees that are coming down, like they don't give a fuck that this has anything to do with code and speech. Like they give a fuck about controlling us. And like I guarantee there will be some AI emergency and that open source will be totally banned. And if you like have a garage AI, like your neighbor should rat you out because like you're planning the next Holocaust and you hate everyone. And like that shit'll go down. It's gonna be fucking terrifying.
It could potentially be even worse than that in the sense that like we might enter a world. Think about the amount of people that are mobile first computer users globally. It's quite a few, right? The average person is doing a lot of things from their phone. The phone is not something that you can code on. You can't program on a phone, right? And so what if we move into some world where like the vast majority of consumers are using a hardware that can't be programmed on. So they're not using desktop computers anymore, laptop computers anymore. And it's this read only and you can't write to it sort of computing platform. And basically like they make it so that being a programmer is a licensed profession that you have to go through the government in order to get credentialed in order to do. Otherwise, they're going to treat you with an extreme level of hostility. There's going to be various fines and jail time and yada yada for programming outside the bounds or programming without KYC or credentials. Like, that's not that far of a leap. You know, we all really, I think guys our age too, especially, we all take the open internet so for granted because that was the first internet we knew and that was our first touch point. We just thought, oh, the internet will always be this way. And human beings are lust for control and power, and they're going to find all the choke points and try and stomp on our necks with it. And that's what's going on now. It's like Eric said, like, it's all about control. It's not about freedom. It's not about principle. It's not about free speech. It's not about code. It's not about possibilities. It is about money. It is about control. That's what it's about.
I saw a lot
What
tweeting
was
about that
the-
very thing, that got just the fact that governments are already angling to introduce licensing requirements for software engineers. Just like you said, like attorneys, like doctors, et cetera. And that seems the
Yeah.
obvious attack vector, right? That is a social, well, it's a social engineering attack on using social engineered attacks as an excuse to introduce the licensing.
What was the bill that recently passed Congress regarding like being able to search without a warrant on people, or like or spy
yeah,
without a warrant or something like that?
It's an
Surveillance.
extension. It's an extension of the State of Emergency Act that was put in 2001 that extended the FISA court, which specifically is like a Foreign Surveillance Act, to go from being able to just broadly surveil suspicious Americans to now it has blanket search powers for all Americans at any point in time that they feel that there is a possibility that somebody could be working with a foreign government or a non-state nationality, which is like one of the important parts of what opens it up to, like, now if you're like a terrorist or somebody who is a money laundering cryptocurrency, what do they like to call us? Spooky ghost shadow coders or some shit. Like it's just very clear to me like where this is all angling itself to. And I don't know about you guys, but like in Normie Land, I like struggle pretty desperately with like nihilistic depression, because you like point this out to people and they're like, look, man, I just like I'm just doing my job, and I like a little sports ball and maybe a barbecue, and and it's just like, guys, like I'm talking about like the enslavement of all humanity and your children. Like, could you like read a book to make a difference about that? And they're like, oh, like a whole book? Like, look, man, just doing my job.
You know, I thought that for a long time, Eric, and I struggled with it as well. And then just recently, probably in the last like few months, just this wave of just, rational optimism has overtaken me. And now I just feel like there's too many of us, guys like us, specifically millennial aged males, who had a peek at the world as it was, right? And are not willing to accept the world as it's being told to us it will be. And if we find, like, as a cohort, if we find our balls and fucking actually get politically motivated and active and fight for America, then we're going to win, because the people that we're fighting against are slowly dying off due to decrepitness. I mean, how many times has what's the over-under on amount of times Joe Biden has sundowned in the Oval Office? If you don't know what that is, it's when dementia patients get like confused, like, I don't know where I am, and they start pulling out their IV tubes and shit. Like, how many times has he done that in the Oval? 100 times. How many days are in the year? 365 days? That's how many times he's done it. Okay. It's like, these are the people that we think are like, we can't beat. Oh, they're so powerful. This man shits his pants on the daily, dude.
Yeah, and like Eric, I feel the same way, HODL, and have felt that way for a while. I mean, it's not that you don't notice just how like clownish everything is, but one of the things that makes me optimistic is like everyone is noticing now. Like, yes, you're always going to be able to find, the meme of the guy at the barbecue, like, that's crazy. Did you see the game last night? But like so many people now, like you like everyone is noticing. There's a lot of noticers out there, and people are noticing. And COVID was obviously a massive like component of that. And people are just noticing that how deeply corrupt and fucked so many things are. And, not everyone's found their way to the solution yet. And like, obviously, it seems obvious to me that this emergence of like the religious tendency is a part of that. People are recognizing the chaos that's happening in the world. They're recognizing they don't have like a masthead to strap themselves to. They're looking for, stability and order in the chaos, and religion is a part of that, and reconceptualizing, government and what their perspective on the world, and like, and all the mainstream media is nothing anymore. Like no one watches that shit. Like, and you have people like Tucker, who has a massive audience, and he's emblematic of that. He'll say like, look, man, like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever, my whole career, I just towed the party line. I thought like being a good red-blooded American was like, yeah, gung-ho for Iraq and everything's fine and we're the good guys, no one else is bad. And you can see now when he talks about it, like that's just not the case. Everyone's been lied to for so long. And when you realize that, it requires you to recapitulate your perspective. And that's the journey of trying to discern truth and integrate it into your perspective. And it's messy, right? And the clownishness is still happening in the background. But what makes me super optimistic is like everyone is noticing. And so that energy, that will is going to manifest into solutions. And I think, many of us have probably been like dejected from the political process for a long time. And, I don't know where I fall on that, but I do think like what HODL just said, like a lot of young people are going to say like, no, things are messed up. And why can't I be the one to contribute to rectifying them? Like, why, like I feel like I'm a good person. At least I try to be. I try to pursue truth and virtue and goodness. Like, why am I letting the inmates run the asylum? Why don't I fucking get involved? Right? Like on a local level, on a larger level, whatever. But like this abdication of responsibility that was just de facto because everyone was like, well, it's too fucked to ever fix. I think people are now realizing like, well, yeah, but if we don't fix it, it's really fucking fucked. And, so might as well like try to ascend to a greater form of responsibility and contribute to fixing it. And like, we've talked before, like we mentioned it with Tulsi, right? Who by the way, seems like low key a shortlist for VP if on the Trump side, but we can touch that in a second. But like we said to her, sure, like, and be engaged in the political process. I think it's good to have good people there because at a minimum, maybe a good person can get in where a bad person might have. Like Thomas Massie is a great example, right? Like from what I see from him, he seems like a pretty sensible character. Now he's like one out of whatever 300 or however many people there are in Congress. What if half the people in Congress were like him, or 75%? Like, wouldn't that make for a better situation? I think it would, but with the caveat that still the first line of defense has to be your own individual actions in your life, right? Not putting all the faith in a politician or the political process, but using, freedom tech to establish as much of it as you can in your own life, and then branching out from there. It's like the Peterson thing, right? Clean your own room first, establish your own freedom, sovereign technology stack first, push away, oppression and authoritarianism in whatever ways you can first, and then branch out further and see what broader of an impact or difference you might be able to make. And so I think all this noticing we're seeing now is going to manifest into stuff like that. And I'm pretty pumped about it.
Yeah, I'm hoping that there's whatever vestiges of like decentralization are left in the US. I feel like we can embrace those as leverage points, right? To just participate in the political process at a local level and try to move the ball forward. Moving the ball forward means something like just dismantling things, right? Just pulling back some of these laws, pulling back some of the interference, the tariffs, the taxes, et cetera, et cetera. We need more Javier Milei imitation. And I don't know, maybe people will get motivated by that guy and we'll see some of that in the US, but I don't see where it seems like it would happen here if nowhere else, because we're the place where anyone can get involved, right? It's the least, obviously it's very hierarchical, but anyone can run for the House. Anyone can get involved with local politics in a way that it appears to me is not so accessible in the rest of the world. So maybe we'll see.
To be fair, getting on the ballot is actually, look, long story short is I've had experience trying to get myself on the ballot in federal elections, and it actually costs like a surprisingly large sum of money to actually just get your name on the ballot itself, in addition to like the number of signatures and the distribution. So while I agree with you to some extent, the threshold's a lot higher and more difficult than a lot of people think it is, and I think that's part of the narrative that serves like the whole freedom and open system of democracy.
I actually didn't know that.
You
I've
know,
just seen a lot of people on the ballot that I was surprised to see. Um, but yeah, I don't know. It seems like the decentralization that was planted in the US would be kind of a match made in heaven for the decentralized tools that we have. So hopefully people will just start using those leverage points to push Bitcoin into the political process. But I guess that remains to be seen.
you know what though? It's kind of like leaders arise like from the people, right? Like especially great politicians. They arise at these moments because the people ordain them. The people put them up for the job, right? Like, and of course, the person that we think of as being like the strong leader throughout time, like, yeah, they're an exemplary person. They're a special person, but they like there's this feeling in the population that sort of swells up and they can ride that wave all the way to the office, right? So it's like it's really about the spirit of the American people, and we are a very unruly people. Thank God. Like we still don't like to be told what the fuck to do. Like all that shit that we went through like in 2020 where it seemed like everybody was a sheep. That was a media manipulation. That was shadows on the wall. You know what I mean? That was not real. You went outside and talked to people. I was at a diner in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho during the middle of the pandemic, and I had just come from Spokane, which is super liberal. And so I had a mask on when I walked into the diner, and everybody in the diner stopped. It was like record scratch, like, and they looked at me like, "What are you doing, faggot?" And I was just like, "Oh shit, I'm one of you, man. I'm one of you." I took off the mask of me. I was like, "I'll have a cherry pie and a Coke, miss. Thank you." Like what I'm saying is, America is still unruly as fuck, and that story where we were all like sheep led around by the nose that's a fake story, man. That's a media manipulation story. That's like, I don't know, it's the dying words of the 20th century media empire as it was going out. And of course its dying words were fucking horrific manipulation, like all the rest of the things that it ever said too.
I mean,
Especially true in red states, right?
I still have that faith in the American spirit itself. In terms of like the democratic process and thing, like I think that thing's super fucked. I think it's absolutely out of control in terms of it has nothing to do with democracy. It's part of a political system that's designed for power and control. And I think that like the classic paradigms of politics like don't even fit where we're going. Like these technologies are so fucking powerful, they just shatter the paradigm of what's happened before. And so it's like we get some like insane cypherpunk version of like liquid democracy on steroids or something, or we get like hyper dystopia where like most people are deeply, deeply hypnotized and controlled and like fucking absorbed in this Borg-like matrix world. Like it's already extremely powerful, but the direction we're moving, it's gonna capture people in a way that they will be asleep the entire time. It'll be crazy.
I agree that it's going to be what we're heading into is a maelstrom. We're already in the like early stages of this fucking crazy chaotic maelstrom, but it's only going to get more psychedelic. At the end of Tim Leary's life, the number one thing he was talking about was the internet, as the internet was the most psychedelic phenomenon that humanity had ever seen. And like people kept trying to get him to relive the glory days of the 60s in his interviews, and he was like, "Fuck all that. The internet is the new LSD." And it's great when you watch these interviews from him when he's dying, and he's right. And he said basically exactly what Eric just said, and what we all know to be true, that like individuals are rising up to be more powerful than ever, and these sort of oligopolies of like traditional control are going to, there's going to be a clash between those two things, and nobody knows how it's going to play out. And like I don't know though. I mean I do feel it's like it's so great watching like Elon. Whatever you think of Elon, like Elon is like a character who was like in the club. There's like a club that runs the world. There's like a cabal of like 150 people. None of us are in it. You can be a billionaire and not be in this club. It's a very exclusive club. Elon was in the club and basically said, "This club is gay. I hate this club. I'm leaving. Fuck you guys." And then left. No one's ever left the club in public, Like, I don't know, man. I mean, that's pretty fucking badass. That kind of shows where we're headed, Like more guys like Elon.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, to your point about the kind of the spirit of the people, like let's take a person like Hitler, right? It's not like Hitler was just like the devil incarnate and came to power out of nothing and just was like, I'm the boss now. As with anyone, like politicians, celebrities, people like Elon, entrepreneurs, popularity in general. It's like someone acts a certain way, and then the people that they're acting in reference to go, "Ooh, yeah, I like that more." And then the person's like, "Oh, more Hitler? Okay, here's some more Hitler." And then they're like, "Yeah, more Hitler."
Right.
And he's like, "Oh, more Hitler? Okay,
Right.
here's more Hitler." And right, so and that can go in a bad way if the people are not properly oriented, or if they're possessed by like the wrong spirit, if you will. But it can go the right way if they're possessed by the spirit of truth and freedom and virtue and sovereignty. And I think that's part of the reason why I'm optimistic, because when people like Elon stand up and give everyone the middle finger, or say like, fuck you, Bob, you know, as Bob Iger, as like the quintessential like status quo media figure, let's say, you know, and he says fuck you, and the crowd, you know, the Twitterverse roars and loves him for it. And anywhere that happens these days, like if anyone stands up to the mainstream media, stands up to the corrupt politicians, everyone fucking loves it. So what I see is that like the good stuff, like the spirit of the good, is being responded to extremely well and vigorously, right? So it's being incentivized in that way. And so when people stand up and say, for example, I've heard RFK Jr. and Tucker say this recently, because like a lot of people would listen to both of them actually and think, oh, well, they're like big, famous, powerful people. They can say what they want. But most people in those positions actually become more restrained when they're powerful, because they don't want to step
Right.
on the toes of the people that they socialize with. They don't want to lose what they have, all that kind of stuff. And so when people in those worlds, that class, whatever, say things like, yeah, no, the CIA, you know, murdered JFK, or the CIA murdered my family, or the government lied about this and that, or like they're basically unrestrained right now. And so people will say like, aren't you kind of afraid? Like, you know, people get taken out one way or the other, whether it's like physically taken out or they get canceled and maligned and whatever. And both of them, their message these days is like, there are worse fates than death. Like, what are you about?
Yeah.
Like, are you going to speak the truth regardless of the cost? Or are you going to cower and live a life of basically quiet desperation? But not just that, because in your cowering, you're possessed by the spirit that brings about the Hitler types, right? Because you allow them to have, you feed into that. So if you don't feed into the good, you're de facto feeding into the evil. And so it's, I just, again, I'm optimistic by the fact that guys in those positions are saying things like that. There's worse things than death, and they're living it out, and people are fucking loving it. They're like, fuck yes, you're right. Right? There are worse things than death. And so again, like with all the messed up darkness and, you know, clown world stuff that's going on, at a minimum, we didn't have that 5 years ago. And so that's got to be a massively like optimistic change. So again, like if we were having these conversations 4 or 5 years ago and we didn't have that, it was just like the total crazy clownish, you know, COVID era without all of that. And so you combine that kind of emerging spirit with the emerging technologies that are available. And again, of course, it's going to be messy, but like, damn, I think I see all that shit and it amps me up tremendously.
Yeah. Fuck yeah.
That quote
It's,
that
you know, I mean, oh, go ahead, Rob.
was just a couple of things that came up for me was that quote, "Evil happens when good men stand by and do nothing." It's like exactly what you're describing. The good men have basically had their tree shaken, right, over the past few years, and probably a lot of us have seen ourselves do things we don't want to do again, right? Like you mentioned wearing the face diaper into the fucking diner. Like you probably wouldn't do that again in the same circumstances.
Right.
And so there was kind of a polarized reaction to the compliance ritual. You know, some people really bend over and took it, and some people are like, never again. I will never fucking do that again under any circumstances. And they changed their life. And so that sounds a lot like the invigoration of the American spirit, like you're describing. You know, we're getting to that. If there are worse fates than death, well, then we're getting back to that "give me liberty or give me death" kind of spirit that this country was really founded upon. So, and the fact that ideas and, you know, action and people seeing one another through digital windows is so so easy, right? It's so easy to see people doing all these things now that I feel like it's going to accelerate the mimesis, the imitation. So as people stand up and they get an applause from the crowd for standing up to corrupt fuckface number one, then other people are going to see that. They're going to imitate it. And again, Javier Milei, right? It's like, I think a guy like that has really captured that spirit in particular because that place was particularly corrupt. So this is good news as far as I can tell, but yeah, the transition is highly uncertain.
Dude, I mean, America is also brutally corrupt right now. I mean, the corruption is, you know, maybe it was always this way and we didn't have this sort of lens into it that we do now, but the things that we can see going on in broad daylight, it's like we're watching a fucking robbery take place. You know, I mean, and our foreign policy and like the places we send money and why we send money there and what that money does. I mean, and this is your money that you pay taxes for. And but oh, by the way, if you don't pay your taxes, they'll murder you in front of your children. I mean, it's the craziest shit that you can ever think of. And it's like, I have like, it's weird. It's like I have two lives. It's like my one life, you know, every day I'm just like a boring suburban dad. I take care of my kids. You know, we go to the park and do stuff and whatever. I pay all my taxes. I'm super compliant. Like I'm cucked by the state. Like it's all true. But then, you know, I come on here and I share with you guys and I'm like, I just have to say the way I think things are true. And if somebody has a problem with that and they want to murder me for it, like so be it. Because if they're going to take away your free speech, the only logical conclusion is to use your fucking voice as loudly as goddamn possible before they take away your speech. And one of the reasons I like doing these talks with you guys is because I know all three of you to be men of strong character who will say what you believe is true. You're not going to always be right. None of us are always right. But I know that you will all say what you think is true and you will use your voice up until the minute they black bag us all and take us to Eric's gulag. You know?
Well, like it's not mine. It's just named after me. Being please don't judge
But
me about all of the terrible
Gulag.
things I will do.
Sounds
and
like
how
a
I'll
sick
portray you
nightclub.
being tortured. So I just want to clarify that.
That is the energy that, you know, I see emerging. And again, like I think it's part of the reason for the religious resurgence, because one, people are saying, well, who am I, just little old me, to stand up to, you know, all the chaos and stuff. And so they want to find a source of strength and something that they can stand in front of or behind or with to say, oh, with this I can stand up. And of course, there's the element of identifying with something beyond yourself so that you can have the courage to say, well, I'm going to say what I believe to be true. And if it costs me everything, well, that's fine, because I don't identify with me primarily. I identify with the principles of this system of belief, let's say. And, you know, and the religious question is a big, complex discussion, but it seems to me clear that there is a resurgence. And I think those two reasons are at least part of it.
Well, you know, there's this meme that I think I first heard from Dave Smith where, you know, basically it's like, our rights come from God. Our rights do not come from you. Our rights come from God. They are inalienable. This is part of the American spirit. This is America. You cannot take that from us. You don't get to tell us how to behave or think or act. You don't get to tell us what our rights are. Our rights come from God. That's where our rights come from. They cannot be taken from us. You know? Repeat that as many times as you need.
A tough pill to swallow for, you know, a huge portion of people that are secular and actually would laugh at that assertion. You know, they know that well, I don't know if you saw the MSNBC host that actually like did laugh at that. They were like deriding Christian nationalists or something, white Christian nationalists, for saying like their rights come from God. And they're like, oh, like how, you know, how juvenile are they? Because, you know, to people that have no religious sensibility whatsoever, no sense of spirituality whatsoever, it just seems like such a ridiculous notion. It's like, no, the government, the state, the political apparatus, however you want to characterize it, that is where you get your rights from. And, you know, so it's a pretty big divide for that group, because they're, you know, the purely secular mind, let's say, is very, very far away from agreeing with what you just said.
I've come to this conclusion recently that there's no such thing as secularity. Like there's no such thing as atheism. It doesn't exist, right? Like, so like this new thing that calls itself secularness or atheism or humanism or wokeism or whatever is a religion. It has religious precepts. Right. It's a different God, and it's a worse God in every way than the Christian God. And I do not want to live in their society. I want to live in a Christian society. Right. And so for me, I look at the world as now competing religions. This is my meta-analysis on shit. And it's about picking the best religion. And I'm not going to pick the religion of, white privileges equals original sin, and we should all do gay space communism. Sorry, that one's not for me. Maybe it's for you, not for me, champ. I'm going with the Old Testament God, fire and brimstone. Let's go.
You see
Yeah,
this with,
I'm gonna go with monotheistic fascism with a technological twist. I think we essentially need a revolutionary vanguard of technologists to go educate the classes on how their oppression is done through technology, and to empower them with radical cryptography and the sovereign tools to empower them, and probably to pay them to do it, and build a circular economy that's specifically based on tax resistance against the federal government, while specifically building a state-based movement to radicalize the states against the federal government. But I'm not gonna fucking do this, so somebody please pick up this idea, and I'll like join your crew when you get it going, because I'm not the organizing type, I'm the thinking type. So
on that point of
One day,
atheism being non-existent, the Richard Dawkins was recently made a bunch of noise when he said he was culturally Christian.
Mhm.
Like the guy that, the father of rational atheism, basically admitting that there's encoded cultural logic in his way of being that is inherently Christian, right? Like respecting one another, not stealing, not killing, etc. And so you also see like things like Christ is King going viral, like all this shit
Yeah.
against humanity, and all of a sudden people just have this response, right? It's like a religious movement online, basically. And I'm reminded of that old Kierkegaard quote. He said, "What looks like politics and imagines itself to be political will one day unmask itself as a religious movement." I think basically all of these symbolic canopies under which we organize ourselves are ultimately religious in nature, right? This is the human
Mhm.
superpower, is that, I fucking hate Yuval Harari. However, he's the one that popularized the idea that we can cooperate flexibly in large numbers by telling stories. That's an inherently religious enterprise. And it doesn't matter if you call it science, nationalism, a company, it doesn't matter. They all have this kind of religious impulse. And so when you take, God out of the equation, GOV fills the power vacuum. And maybe we're seeing the response to that. GOV try to really insert itself, literally, I mean, try to inject itself into people, and people are like pushing back now. So
Yeah, I think the core difference to me in my, like, when I was looking at, wokeness versus Christianity, was there's no redemption in the woke religion. So people do something that they didn't even know was wrong. They're cast aside, and then there's just no coming back ever. And certain people are, verboten till the end of time, and other people are exalted for no reason other than circumstances of their birth, right? And it's like that is one of the most anti-Christian ideas I could ever think of. And like, in the Christian sense, like, redemption is like the core quality, and like, I want to live in a society with redemption as a strong principle. I don't want to live in a society that has anti-redemption as the principle,
yeah.
it's funny
yeah.
because I actually see it differently in that because I see wokeism as fundamentally an extension of Maoism. So like if you
Yeah,
engage
it
in
is.
self-criticism and then self-extension in that criticism, which is like part of how the Borg transforms. And specifically, like, it's about attacking individuals specifically for like their engagement in those social hierarchies that have created the system of oppression. So it seems very Maoist to me, and part of that is trying to force people to engage in self-criticism so you can like destroy them less, but still destroy them.
I love
Yeah.
James Lindsay. He said, wokeism is calling everything you want to control oppressive until you control it.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah.
That's good. But I think
true.
it's this is a version of what we've all been saying. But back to that point about the spirit of the people that create the politician, the strong man, the leader, whatever. I mean, it's another way of conceptualizing it is like we all are animated by a spirit, right? Some motive force. And whatever is the most motivating force within us, whatever most determines our actions, you could say that that's our personal God, or that's our animating spirit. And you can compare animating spirits. You can see like, well, what does the animating spirit of however we want to characterize like the woke spirit, what does that produce? in a person, in a society, in a community, in a family, whatever. Broadly, we would all probably agree, doesn't produce a great individual or family or community or anything, right? And if you adopt another spirit, if you put yourself as the highest thing, what does that create? What kind of outcome does that create? Probably not great either, right? But and the religious enterprise, as far as I see it, or at least part of the way I see it, is trying to determine what the most generative, creative, productive, harmonious, animating spirit actually is, so that then you can identify with that and it produces the best outcome, the strongest and, most well integrated individual and family and community and country and nation. And there's a ton of pitfalls all along the way, right? Because institutions become corrupt, and if you're identifying with the institution and not the spirit, then you can be led astray. But the punchline is that the entire enterprise, and this is reflected in the anthropological record throughout all of recorded human history, or even not like pre-written history, is like this element of human society that is attempting to identify the best motivating spirit. And the assertion is, well, once you identify that, or the assumption rather that goes with it, is like, well, if it's the best motivating spirit, it must somehow be fundamental, right? It must not be just made up and fake if our alignment with it produces the best results in this reality, right? And so you could say like all of the other animating or motivating spirits that are not real, or that are less real or fundamental than the realist one, they self-destruct, and ultimately they're not sustainable. They eat themselves. Whereas the actual animating spirit perpetuates itself sustainably and harmoniously, and strengthens and creates as it's engaged, rather than the reverse. And again, so that's why, in my opinion, that's one of the reasons why religions have been so central, because of a recognition of that. But then there's the issue of like, well, how do you reconcile the different approaches? Now, I tend to think that the approaches are not as different as they seem. Their differences are more superficial than fundamental. But punchline is if you do away with that entirely, or if you just say that enterprise is not relevant or important at all, then something is going to fill the vacuum when you're not even looking, and it's going to destroy you, right? And that is the spirit of chaos. That's the spirit of the devil, however you want to conceptualize it. And I think this is why a lot of people today are seeing and conceptualizing our time as kind of like a spiritual battle happening, because it's the ones that are engaging in that enterprise are trying to find the most fundamental and most beneficial motivating spirit, which I think is causing part of that resurgence to Christianity. And then those that have said it doesn't exist, it's not important, shrugged it off, and are just being entirely consumed by a more chaotic spirit, and they're not even aware of it, even though they're intentionally shrugging off the search for the right spirit, but they don't realize that by doing that, they're being possessed by a destructive one. And this is why I think people are framing it as a spiritual battle. And I kind of tend to agree, although there's a lot of explanations that have to go along with it, because words like spirit and religion and God carry so much baggage that, you really got to take your time explaining it if people are going to grasp it, fruitfully.
I love the definition of spirit from, I don't know who it's from, but the we that is in I and the I that is in we. And so it's that idea that the pattern, right? The pattern of action that best serves both the individual and the collective across time is what you're describing, right? It's like, again, that's why I think the Christ is King meme goes viral. It's like people realize, oh, this is how we need to try to imitate this guy. This guy, it's almost like a technological view on Christ. Is like, this is the role model. This is who we need to imitate to create the best outcomes. And that is, I think in terms of religious precepts, you were saying, what is the most respectful, peaceful, generative, prosperous, etc. spirit we can embody? Like, well, I think in a very practical sense, it's life, liberty, property, right? Which we can reduce to really just private property. It's like honoring one another's possessions and honoring one another's bodily integrity, not stealing from one another, not killing one another, not coercing one another. That is, the economic axiom that every act of theft reduces productivity. That actually optimizes human productivity, which would optimize human flourishing. So I think private property is more of like a discovery than this arbitrary invention. People think it's just something we decided, let's just all pretend that we own the things we create. And in a way we did, but it's also the most generative mode of being, right? It's the path to prosperity, to peace, to long-term cooperation, et cetera. And so I think almost in a technical sense of the word spirit, like, you say the I that is in we and the we that is in I, it's like, what do you expect others to do? What pattern of action have they internalized that they also expect you to internalize? And there's just this general expectation that you're going to have respect for one another across these fronts, that if we embody the spirit of Christ in a technical sense, then we actually get the best moral and economic outcomes. And I'm not saying that's dawning on people consciously, but I think that we might just be figuring that out as a process of kind of trial and error and again, imitation that's occurring through digital mediums.
Well, it's really interesting to think of these two perspectives. One of, let's just take the Christ idea and this woke idea from the same sort of perceptual being of like who and what the other is. And it's interesting because like this Christ incarnate idea of like me honoring and reflecting myself as a being like through this sort of lensing of Christ, like that gives me sort of this eminent, holy, infinite being of love, light, and care that reflected back on me if I want to be in relation with that. That's like pretty positive. But then you figure like a government's lensing of this same thing, like the other's this thing to be curious about. It's to like identify, to label, to understand. And this is all for an appraisal of safety and security. Like, is this thing an enemy or not? And in that sort of hyperness that not only the security apparatus is, but more specifically and interesting, like wokeism through this idea of this sort of inverted transcendental path towards like transhumanism, that like we can, like if you just believe enough and have enough of the right drugs and capacities and other things, like you can just move past this body or being human or these identities and what those mean. And that's not for like the infinite liberation of who you are. It's for like the final enslavement of all that you could be. And it's very interesting how these things are like inversions of one another that we talk about holy war. Cause like I 100% believe that like there's absolutely 100% a holy war that ends in an eschatological crisis where like each of us actually come to the true and profound realization that like this is actually our lives and we're living through this, as insane and fucked up as it all is. And that like if you choose to be a playable character, you're like taking your life as a token, putting it in the fucking game, and like it's gonna get fucking wild. But it's definitely not gonna be normal.
I think we're all already in the game, unfortunately. Like, us four, we're in the game. Outcome TBD.
Yeah,
Bitcoin
outcome
puts you in the game,
TBD.
right? Once you're in self-custody, you're in the fucking game. That's for sure.
That's so true.
We're all on our own individual Final Fantasy journeys, like meeting up with the party, and then like they're like, oh, like you're a coin bearer as well. Like join the party. Let us show you some new skills and technical skill sets to train in.
Not to get weird and metaphysical real quick, but like the first time I made a Bitcoin transaction, I felt the inversion happen. I felt like going from an NPC to being a playable character. I went from feeling scared and nervous about doing something. Am I allowed to do this? Am I going to lose my money? Am I going to send it to the right? What's going to happen? There's nobody to call. And then I did it. And then I was like, that feeling flipped to a feeling of, oh shit, I'm in charge. This is my world, bitch. Get out of my way. Right. Like,
Boner time.
Yeah, 100%.
That's me doing LSD.
Yeah.
But Eric, of course, I appreciate your rosy predictions about the future always on these calls. But of course it could go that way, right? I mean, every outcome is possible. But don't you feel like we were in Madeira together, right? Which was outstanding time, beautiful place, great conference, amazing people. And that's kind of the point. Like I know it's super small scale, but that energy and the energy we were talking about of people, like all the noticers out there that are starting to say, hey, wait a minute, Phil, and then go down whatever road. and then this kind of emerging sense that there's a responsibility to do something other than just pursue your own gratification, other than just like build out your own life, but there's a responsibility to contribute to something larger. Don't you think like that kind of groundswell of energy all together might end up just overwhelming, you know, the shitty, corrupt, evil amalgam, however we want to characterize it, that you often refer to?
I mean, like, look, I 100% feel it when I'm in it, and I'm like, these are like the transcendental moments of like the deepest truth of my being and who I am and the capacity that we have to change the world. And then it's like 5:30 and the puppy wakes me up and eats shit on the floor, and like I've gotten barely any sleep, and like just my whole life feels like an absolute fucking train wreck. And I'm like, oh, I'm like supposed to be part of this collective that's gonna like change the world and do anything. I'm like, I can barely wipe my own ass at this point in time. How the hell am I supposed to do this? You know? And so like I think a lot of my own shit's coming up here, but not literally, but proverbially.
But that is, you know, and I obviously I have tons of empathy for, you know, the struggles of all of us and everybody else, but that is the path toward the solution, right? It's not like having our lives be all fucked up and crazy and us not be able to handle them, but then like trying to go out and expect some major change in the world, but it's developing that core of our own being and our own life, and then expanding that order out from there. And if everyone takes on that responsibility, well, we sure have a better shot at building a world that is more orderly, reflective of that, harmonious, peaceful, prosperous, all those things we always talk about, right? So like it is the calling is to resolve those things, as hard as I know it can be at various times in our lives.
So look, I 100% agree, but John, here's the major problem. The people are retarded.
I knew that was the word.
Yes, but we don't need
true.
to be. That's the point. We don't need to be. And the we is everyone listening to this and every single person that there is, right? So yes, the people are retarded, but every individual doesn't have to be.
Well,
That's
and again,
the responsibility.
If we become imitation worthy, right, by succeeding in our lives, right, in whatever respect that means, financial,
Right.
ethical,
Right.
just you know, how we carry ourselves, then the people become unretarded over time because they start to imitate those that are most successful. So that's how I see it. It's like Bitcoin empowers individuals to be, well, more powerful in terms of purchasing power, also more ethical, more enterprising, right? They keep more of the fruits of their labor. So the people that exhibit the most industriousness and enterprise and individuality and ingenuity, those are the people that are going to succeed the most. And then people will imitate that the most because that will be the most successful strategy. Whereas in the current world, you know, who's got the highest net worth in the world? I've heard it's Putin, right? I've heard he has like a 500 billion dollar net worth or something like that. That guy's a fucking statist, you know? So like people are imitating that wealth acquisition strategy rather than just the good old fashioned entrepreneurial strategy. And so I think that's how Bitcoin transforms us from the inside out. So yes, the people might be retarded today, but they would become less retarded over time as they imitate those that are most successful in an entrepreneur-led world.
Then we're just
By the way, it's probably MBS who's the richest. Like MBS has got to be worth 2 trillion or something. You know,
who was that?
Saudi guy.
Saudi Arabia.
Mohammed bin Salam, Saudi Arabia.
And is that from oil or statecraft or both?
Both. Yeah, it's oil and politics can't be separated. Oil and water can. No, but the thing you were saying too about like people looking up to us and imitating or imitating people that do well. When you enter Bitcoin, you're also going to have your faults magnified as well. So like, it's a really tough character test, you know.
That's like an incentive for you to get your shit together in a way, though, right?
Yeah.
Oh.
I think it just incentivizes my autism more. So I mean, it kind of depends on where you're at, you know.
Autism's a superpower, though, you know.
Apparently,
yes, it's worked out pretty good. But you know, this is, you know, again back to the conference in Madeira. Eric, and we talk about this all the time, but there will be people that come to Bitcoin out of necessity, right? Whoever, the unbanked or the people that don't have access to whatever, and or the currency is shit, or but I think it's conceivable that way more come because it's just a way better vibe. Like people would go to a conference like the one in Madeira or any, Bitcoin only conference, and they'll just be walking around and the vibes are so good and everyone's like polite and respectful and the conversations are interesting and people are optimistic and there's just the vibe. Again, the vibes are just so good, and people are coming from a world where that's lacking tremendously, where it's like just everything is so
Yeah.
superficial, nothing is all that meaningful. And you kind of, in your social affairs, you're just kind of playing a character because you can't really say what you want to say or be yourself. And you come into this place and it's like, no, like, just like whatever you want to say, but be able to back up what you say, be able to, bring some rationale to your opinion and your perspective and hash it out with people. And along the way, become more free in a variety of ways. Your purchasing power and your access to your property and all this kind of stuff. And I just think like that taken together will be increasingly compelling. And I think that's what happens at Bitcoin conferences. Like whoever had never gotten a dose of it but went to the conference in Madeira, I got to imagine they left thinking, now it's a bit skewed. Our experience is a bit skewed because people know who we are. People come up to us and we have all these great conversations and the vibes are good. So I actually had a conversation with a guy there who, is just a normal pleb. And I sat down with him in the food area and he said, it was a bit of a lonely experience at the conference. And I was like, oh shit, really? And he was like, yeah, man, because like, nobody's coming up to me to talk and I don't, I'm not that outgoing, I guess. So I'm just kind of here listening to some of the talks. And I was like, oh yeah, I never really considered it that way. And so, we ended up talking for like an hour and a few people came around and, maybe that turned it around a little bit for him. But so I get that. But my broader point is it's so much more appealing than what's on offer in the normie world right now that I just think, to Rob's point, like you just have to express it so that people know it's there and it's available to be mimicked or emulated or invited in and that kind of stuff. And so that again is the responsibility, right? To express that in your own behavior.
It's the thing about it being global too. Like you guys were just in Madeira. I was just in Bedford in the UK. And like, I had the same exact experience that you had in Madeira. I just had it in Bedford in the UK with like a whole, a bunch of Irish and British people. And it's just so cool that it's like it's a global vibe. It's a global phenomenon, global tribe. Like everybody's, gathered around the digital fire to tell stories essentially. And it's, I don't know, for me, I'm still obsessed with it 10 years. I've been in Bitcoin 10 years. I'm still obsessed with it 10 years later. And it's probably going to be a lifelong obsession for me. And there is no, I don't know. You're never going to see a rage quit out of me because I don't know. I just love it. I love it too much. Like all the different permutations. It can get real bad. It can get real good. Whatever. I'm going to be here, through the whole thing.
Another really cool thing I experienced recently. My wife and I traveled to Japan and Madeira, and we went to Malaysia and a couple other places. And every time I'd go, I'd like tweet out like any Bitcoiners in whatever city. And I'd always get a response. And in all of those places, I ended up hooking up with like Bitcoiners privately or going to a Bitcoin meetup. And it's just so great. Like anywhere you go, you have kind of family because you're all pretty much on the same wavelength. And so if you need help with anything, people, happy to direct you and help you and, go out for dinners. And it's like, you can go to most cities in the world probably, and there's going to be like legit Bitcoiners there that just would be happy to host you, take you out, show you around, and that's such an amazing resource and network to have.
And by the way, you don't have to be a dude with 50 or 100,000 followers for that to happen to you. Like every time I've ever been to a Bitcoin meetup, everybody's invited to the bar. Everybody hangs out. It's always a good time, so if you've never been to one, like I would recommend going to one, for anybody listening.
Yeah, I went to the one in go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say it's pretty weird once you actually like plug into the actual like Bitcoin bioelectric node network, i.e. like actual
Yeah.
people. Because yeah, like it's a totally different game. Because like I like to think of my first several years in Bitcoin as like the wanderings of like me through the desert, being like, "Hello, anybody else see this?" There's like one
Yeah.
guy over there. He's like, "Hey." I like walk closer. I'm like, "Hey, you like Bitcoin?" He's like, "Yeah, Feathercoin." Then I turn around. I'm like, "God damn it, it was a mirage."
Fuck
Fuck.
this guy.
But
You know, I
once you start
called
to
that.
link up with others, it's pretty great because I don't know, it's actual friendship and all this other stuff. But yeah, I actually see this as like a burgeoning, truly like spiritual political movement where people eventually get that like, oh yeah, we like hold our own keys because like the evil fucking empire that wants to suck your soul out and own your children forever through your DNA and other like to be clear, like we're at the end of like 100 years eugenics project that's like accelerating itself, and you need to like, get the fuck out. So like if you don't, good luck there because if you don't have Bitcoin, it's gonna be kind of hard to get out. So just putting that out there.
Are you worried that the
Right.
state is going to centralize birth and death over the 21st century? Because I kind of am.
100%. Me and my stepdad had a fight about this recently where he said he thought that
Oh,
you need to
really?
get licensed to have children. And I was like, holy shit, that came out of your mouth. Wow. And no regret. Don't even want to put it back. Wow.
Oh, he said
People have been saying that for a long time,
that
but now
should
that
be
it's
the
actually going to
case.
be a
Yeah.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
people have been saying that as like a thing to say at parties for forever, but now we're on the precipice of that becoming a technical reality once artificial womb technology works. Once you have artificial womb technology that actually works, you have the centralization of birth and death through the state.
And
I
if
mean,
you've
fuck.
damaged everybody's DNA to where reproduction is plummeting and that it's pretty clear that that can't happen, that would be tragic, wouldn't it? It's
I'm
almost like
I'm
100%. It's
just
like, why are testosterone levels at like 250 for like 37-year-old males and shit? You know what I mean? Like, what's going on? Like, why are 22-year-olds walking around here with like a 275 testosterone score? Like, I don't know. Could they
definitely
maybe
not a
take all the
eugenics project.
microplastics out of the food or what? You know?
I was thinking about that, well, for ages, because it's been a trend that's been happening for a long time, like since the 70s, basically. And, so on the one hand, you have the explanation that it's just environmental toxins and the bullshit in our food and plastics and xenoestrogens and all this stuff has just conspired to lower fertility and lower testosterone and make men more into women, basically. Um, so it could all just be by accident and by, not realizing the impacts of our innovation and technology and whatnot. But to the extent that any of it is like intentional by the powers that be, um, I want like I don't think we consider enough just how much the advent of nuclear weapons just totally changed the game for human everything.
Yeah,
For like
that's
just,
true. The nuclear umbrella is a factor because we're never going to go to war, and we all know that. You know?
right. Like it's just the calculus
Right.
of so much like human control, conflict, social order has just been totally changed by the existence of nuclear weapons and the ability for us to like just annihilate ourselves if things go awry. And this is probably not the case, but just kind of like steel manning the argument. Like if there is like this eugenicist cabal and one of their intentions was to like make men in society less aggressive and less manly and less formidable and less willing and able to stand up for themselves and engage in conflict. Maybe it was out of the desire to say, look, if we get into big conflict now, right, if that aggressive spirit like is too out of control, then we will all die because someone's going to press the button. So maybe it was like, look, this ain't great, but we got to make guys more pussy-like because if not, then the nukes are going to kill us all. Just saying.
I think it was. I think it was more like we have nukes. We're not going to war with another superpower. Testosterone is a threat to us. Testosterone is a threat to liberalism, like to the Democratic Party. And so let's cuck everybody and make their taint small with microplastics or whatever. You know what I mean? Like I think the best thing the Republican Party could do would just be hand out free testosterone to the voting base.
I was just gonna say the flip side of that is like if we're especially during COVID, it's like, well, everyone needs a vax because it's for health. It's like if you really want to like fix things, get every dude on TRT, and like
100%. Yeah.
things are probably going to get a lot better.
Dude, there's something weird
Sports is
going
gonna
on
get
though, man, because
incredible.
I'm at that age when everybody's having kids, and like I'm in a normal age range of like people who are in their late 20s to early 30s, which is a very normal, healthy time to have children. And every couple I know is going the IVF route. I mean, it's like it's crazy how many people are doing that. And what's up? Like it's I don't know, it's just bizarre. Like me and my wife didn't have any trouble conceiving. So to me, it's like anathema, but like I hear these stories repeatedly. So there's got to be something going on environmentally. Like I think that's obvious.
Oh,
We just don't know
that's
what
for
it is.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are they doing it
Interest-
for twins, or are they just people that can't
No, they're
conceive?
doing it because they just can't conceive. They literally can't
Oh.
conceive. I mean, and I'm not saying this. I've heard this 6 or 7 couples that are like close to us,
Hmm.
that's a lot, These
I
people
mean,
shouldn't be going to IVF clinics.
like I think that this is all much more simple, and that like there were just all of these I forget the word for things that modify sexual reproduction. Like I think there was just a bunch of those in plastics, and like as that played out, like that's transformed society in a way that like now we have all of this weird shit going on instead of being like, yeah, testosterone plummeted across the board. Like no wonder why all this stuff's coming up to like read
Right.
itself out and to justify it.
Right.
And like
But
and now there's like a feedback loop that it's engaged with in like all of these really weird and entangled ways. Because also like the more that you engage in that like pussy behavior that is going to make you be low T, like the more that you're going to get that. And like it's like a pretty bad feedback loop,
yeah.
The upside
like,
is that there's this emerging trend of like uber masculine shit going on where everyone just or a cohort of people just want to get super jacked and be, super masculine, which, I don't have a problem with. I think it'd probably be good for
100%. No,
society and good for people.
the thing that is worrying though is like again, back to these technologies we're on the precipice of, like the state centralizing birth and death. Like that is going to be a massive issue, because if you take a technology like an artificial womb and a technology like CRISPR and you marry them together and require licensure for births, eventually you're going to have genetically modified humans who are engineered to be more docile and controllable, right?
Yeah.
Which is a crazy, and they'll do it under the guise of XYZ other thing, intelligence or whatever. And then again, this is not to get into the second order effect of like we don't know the unknowns of these technologies also, but you can tell that like it's back to the point that Eric was making earlier, where there's like this like dystopia on one hand, and there's this crazy psychedelic sovereign individualism on the other hand. We don't know what's going to happen, with stuff like that, and it's terrifying when you game it out and think about it. And the average person doesn't think about this kind of shit at all. 0%.
yeah,
People like biology think
enraging.
both.
What was that?
People like biology think both, right? That you'll get something in the east that'll be, the controlled sheeple type of environment, and then you'll have a masculine individualistic revolt in the west, something like that. It's possible we could see that schism.
Yeah.
You're already sort of seeing it a little bit, right? Like you mentioned the masculinity stuff. I would hope that we as Bitcoiners could try and create more of a sound masculinity movement, because the one thing about this fiat masculinity shit that I see, the watches and cars and like all that flashy stuff.
Yeah.
I don't think that's very useful, but obviously self-custody, shooting guns, martial arts, eating well, getting sun, like traditional lifestyle, stoicism, all of these things that live in the realm of sound masculinity, that seems very useful. So I hope Bitcoiners can help.
Yeah, I should have qualified my statement. Of course, like all the flashy watches, Lambo, like over the top masculinity, I just see as insecurity. I mean, as with all things, when you overcompensate, it's insecurity. But to your point, like the masculine archetype, which is supposed to balance the feminine archetype eternally, as the fabric of reality, let's say, then that's what I'm referring to, that I think is lacking in most societies today, and that there seems to be, it's coming with the baggage of the insecure masculinity and all that, garbage stuff. But I think it is emerging also, and that I think is beneficial.
To me, it's not even like a materialist thing. It's like I would call it. I wouldn't even say like fiat masculinity. I would just call it cringe bullshit. Like
Yeah.
nobody who's the man needs to fucking say they're the man. Everybody just knows they're the man. Nobody. Tom Brady has never said, I'm the man. I'm Tom Brady. He doesn't need to say that. He's Tom Brady, you know?
It reminds me of something
I
John said a long time ago, that wisdom is silent, you know, it's just the
Yeah.
way you are. It's just the mode of being. You're not like banging drums online saying, I'm the man. You're just actually living like a man.
yeah.
I mean, I guess the most exciting part of all of this that I'm hearing is that like there is a true spiritual awakening in zeitgeist that's happening where like people, and it's happening all kind of simultaneously, of like people waking up to that, like there's this fucked up matrix thing that wants to control them. There's also a bunch of people like waking up that like there's a higher sense of being and self and purpose and spirituality. There's also like a bunch of people taking psychedelics and drugs who are like cracking themselves open in a way they wouldn't suspect. And you have like a bunch of geezers on the tertiary too who are like, I never did this stuff because it was supposed to rot my brain. And now they try it and they go, oh my God, like the world's different. And like in all honesty, like drugs are one of the places that I'm the most excited, or to qualify it, I should say psychedelic drugs. Like, opiates are pretty horrific across the board, as can provably seen by statistics. But like the fact that like Molly was only created in the 1980s, and like now it's clearly one of the most powerful psychedelic tools that there are in being able to help people over trauma. And people are finally realizing that like LSD and psilocybin for treating alcoholism is unequivocally the most powerful treatment that there is. And like those are two extremely important developments in our like super fucked up world where drug addiction and alcohol addiction are killing, untold millions every year. So there's a lot of really cool stuff going on. And so like I do feel hope. I think I just get dragged down in the mud through my own shit and garbage. That's like more of a me thing than the world thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've obviously been a proponent of psychedelics for a long time, but I do think it can get to a point where it's gratuitous. I see a lot of people falling down that path. So I think
There's
they're
a famous
tremendously
Terrence McKenna. There's a famous Terrence McKenna expression that says, once you get the message, hang up the phone. So like there is a point at which you're supposed to stop doing psychedelics once you've like,
yeah.
gotten
Now,
the message,
like,
right?
Again, to each their own. I don't know the cadence, the frequency, if you want to stop forever, but having control over it, so you're not going back to it because it's gratuitous and fantastical and feels so good, but because it's a tool to become more integrated with reality broadly, but with yourself and with your family and community and with your objectives and your aspirations. I think it can be useful there. And it may be the case that you have an experience or a few and you're like, got it. Now I'm going to go do the hard work. Or maybe it's something, which has been the case with me in the ideal, like it's a, once a year sort of thing where I just go in, clean out the cobwebs from the year, give myself a different perspective to view things on, try to identify, some things that need attention, and communing, right? Like I think it's genuine communing with something, the spirit of reality, whatever you want to call it. And that's important. I think it's important to have or beneficial to have a relationship with that. But again, it can be a crutch, right? It can be its own idol, let's say. And it can be gratifying something that you don't want to be gratifying. So I do think like it's a path you have to tread carefully, and that requires, education and guidance and experience and all that stuff, which is why these experiences and substances had traditionally been so like integrated into culture, right? Like the shaman, basically, like as you're growing up, you would be preparing yourself for your time with the shaman or for these experiences. And there would be a lot of, advanced preparation to make you ready for that. And there would be a lot of, ceremony and ritual around it so that you took it seriously because you knew it was going to be, tremendously impactful into your life. And that was going to be a very powerful experience too. And it could be very fragmentary, or it could be very, it could destabilize you. And so you had to make sure you were going into it as, strong and put together individual, and you could take the good of that experience and not be drawn away by the potential pitfalls. And I do think there will be like an archaic revival in that sense of that sort of approach to them coming back, because the 60s up till now, obviously there's lots of good stuff there, but the Western fiat culture is a very like consumptive driven culture. So there was just the isolate the thing and take the thing and have the experience, and the necessary or at least beneficial surrounding aspects of that weren't there, culturally, familially, community, all that kind of stuff. And of course, the hippies tried to create some of that, but I think it's going to become much more culturally centered, like the Eleusinian mysteries in ancient Greece, right? These were like the central experience that the elite. Now, I think in that time it was a bit more of like these people were actually elite, but of course you're referring to like the upper crust as well. They would experience the Eleusinian mysteries once in their life, and people that would experience it, like Plato and a lot of the people that we would know, they would come out of it saying, well, it was the most profound, impactful experience of my life, and I can say nothing about it, basically. And maybe it's not so much about secrecy of like guarding the secrets, although there's probably some of that, but it was like, what I have to say about it's not important. That's why I'm told not to say anything about it. How I act as a result of the experience is the only thing that's important. So I'm not going to talk about it. But the point is it was so central to that civilization. And it was like, yeah, it was, and I think if we're going to be bringing back the best of our past as we recapitulate what, life and society is all about, based on more virtuous or sovereign or integrated principles, I think there's going to be space for those, those experiences. And maybe it'll morph with, traditional religions in some way, who knows? But yeah, I think they're important, and they're going to make a comeback, but we have to be careful with it.
Something about that experience just being ineffable too, right? That these guys went into these rituals and you literally experience an unspeakable encounter, right? The psychedelic encounter, whatever it may be. And that's powerful, but yeah, it's a tool, right? It's a tool. It kind of has its time and its place, probably really needs to be ritualized and handed to people in a responsible way. I don't know. We're probably kind of dealing with that as a species right now. It's like these things are just going everywhere and we don't have the ritual container for them. So who knows, it's kind of an uncontrolled social experiment among all the other uncontrolled social experiments that are going on in the world today.
Yeah.
But I've found as I get older, man, there's a lot of spiritual discipline and just sobriety. Just being sober, fasting, working out, like trying to be consistent. Consistency is very difficult, I found, like just to do this like same thing, the same rituals day in, day out. It's like an eternal struggle. Like I can never fully get dialed in. And I'm not obviously not perfect at it at all, but leaning into that, I can get a lot of spiritual discipline out of just that alone without anything exogenous to the process.
Yeah, man. I recently took 8 months off of drinking, and I felt my brain state change. So I was like, I had been drinking pretty heavily, like every weekend. Like I was never like an everyday person, but like when I did drink, I would like binge drink. And I've been doing that since I was like 15. So I've been doing it almost 20 years, And I finally took this long break, and then I came back and like socially drank a little bit with people, but just it didn't have the same hold on me. I didn't like feel the need to down 12 drinks or anything anymore. And like, I just viewed it as like, okay, this is like just a drug that's pretty bad for my body, but is like occasionally good in a social setting with good friends and you're having a great time or you're celebrating or something. But yeah, that feeling it changed my brain state was really weird. And I was like, oh, that was when I realized that it was doing something to me even when I wasn't using the drug. And then once I had that realization, I was like, okay, I want to gain control over this thing. I cut it out, and it was like just very interesting to notice some of those changes,
For sure.
Yeah, I have gone through periods of not drinking. Like I think I did like 4 years from 2014 to 18, something like that. And then I did a 7-day water fast at the second week of January this year. And apart from a couple of drinks in Madeira, I haven't had any. And I haven't been binge drinking for a long time, but I have the occasional beer with dinner sort of thing. And I totally agree. Like I think not only is it the actual impact of, the substance, but it's your anticipating it, your, you know, like your desire for it, that is pulling your attention away from something. And the something that is pulling your attention away from is probably more meaningful, important, whether it's your family or your work or your health or whatever. And you know, to Rob's point, like, I feel like this is why there's such a invocation, or so many religious traditions have guidance around how to treat your body. Because I think once you get rid of the noise, let's say, like the pollution, so like once you get rid of bad food and you get rid of things that are fogging up your mind, and you get rid of things that are causing your body not to feel strong and energetic and vital and stuff like that, you're closer to God. You're closer to the order of things, and you can feel it. And the more you refine that approach, I think that's part of the reason why, you know, so many of us kind of do it, is because the more you string together, you know, like being on the path or being disciplined, let's say, like you're eating well and you're working out and you're getting nature and you're getting sun and you're having good encounters with people in your life, and like all the things, right? You're trying to put them in their proper place, and also trying not to be like too obsessive about it, because that is his own pitfall and can draw you away. So if you're able to navigate that path, you end up like just feeling an energy, a closeness, a vitality that seems to enhance the bandwidth or your connection with something beyond yourself. And that's part of the reason why it's so vivifying and so that draws you in, because like you begin to feel that. And then if you go off the path, like if you do go and get wasted, you just feel how much it takes you away from that. Like, you know, physiologically, mentally, everything. You're just like, oh my God, this is horrible. And then, you know, you get back on it, or ideally. So yeah, I mean, again, I think that's why religions were so adamant that, you know, you should do this,
body is your temple,
that, or not do this. Yeah.
Your body is your temple, and you know, you should contemplate how to use it.
I'm not giving up coffee yet, though. It's like my only
and amen.
vice.
If it works for you, like one of the things Paul Saladino dropped on me that was really resonated was the term bio-individuality. That we are each a unique critter, basically, and we have things that work for us and don't work for us. And coffee for me was very destructive. I was very addicted to it.
Really?
Very addicted to it. But it was giving me a lot of trouble with my gut.
I like coffee in the morning. Oh, it's the best shit.
Dude, I still love it. Like my girlfriend's still super addicted to coffee. When I kiss her, smell her breath, like I still get that little taste, you know, like that's my thing now. I don't drink it, but that's all I get. But I feel better. I have more energy now. I have more vitality. Coffee, but I still miss it every day. Like I love it.
On that same idea of bio-individuality, like I wish somebody had shared with me, like the same just sort of goes like across the board for general advice, like all sorts of things that you'll see on the internet. Like it really took me a while for the dawn to be like, oh, like all of the internet, all of the information that you get from the internet is sort of filtered through like what a normal NPC idiot would need. So like the vast majority of it doesn't necessarily apply to me. And that like understanding my own subject, and like one of the things that I've struggled the most with is getting is that like I'm a guy that really thrives if I'm getting between like about like 5 to 6.5 hours of sleep, and if I'm like trying to do more, I just fuck that up. Because what ends up happening is I just lie in bed for an hour and a half before, and it took me a long time to figure out like, oh yeah, you're just like lying in bed for an hour and a half because like you just don't need to go to fucking sleep. You should like do other stuff for a while. Because yeah, then my body just wakes up at like 5:30 otherwise. It's kind of fucked up.
Blows my mind.
Do you know that before electric light, there was this thing called second sleep? Like Chaucer talks about it in his books, that like basically, So basically people would go to sleep with the sun, you know, circadian rhythm on fleek back in those days. That you would go to sleep with the sun, and then you just wake up in the middle of the night and like have a sandwich, like sweep the floor, read a book a little bit. Then you'd go back to sleep, and then you'd wake up and go about the day.
This was called the bewitching hour, and this was also the time that people felt that they had the greatest amount of creative and inspirational energy as well. Yeah, it's like it's 100%. Part of our fucked up routine with time, and like the way that we enslaved and ensnared time through the mechanization of the clock. I have a good Ambigen book that's all about how like time in ancient monastic cenobes was like this flexible thing. So it was like longer during the summer and shorter during the winter, but like it always accommodated in this particular way as a spiritual practice. So I just think it's fucked up that, I don't know, the way that everything has gotten so captured and homogenized by time, and that like it's like fundamentally a thing that's like embedded in our thought, you know.
What if that
Yeah.
witching hour,
Yeah.
back to John's point about, when you fast and you ritualize your day and you eat properly and you exercise, your body really does become a more finely tuned instrument, basically. And so I wonder if that
Mhm.
witching hour is something, because you wake up fasted, right? You're obviously in the twilight state. And I've never done that, but I'm an 8 hour guy. Like I just need my eight plus. Like if I've been working out really hard, it's like 8 or 9.
Mhm.
But occasionally, yeah, occasionally you get those, you come out of those remnants of a dream and you have like I need to get to my phone real quick and write it down. There's like some thought that just a little download you got from wherever it was.
Mm.
Yeah.
Always write those down immediately. There's so many times where I'll be lying in bed half asleep and the insight will come. I'll be like, oh, that's so good. I'm totally going to remember that one tomorrow. And then you wake up and be like, ah, fuck.
So
What was it?
a cool thing I've done with these recently is you take your snippet of a dream that you wrote down in your notes app or whatever, and you go to Mid-Journey with it, and you create to the best of your ability the image that you saw in your dream. And that's a pretty cool thing to do, because some of my dreams are like fucking crazy alien, shit. Like, and it's like I'm always trying to like capture these crazy, striking visual images I saw in my dreams.
That's cool. So
Sounds
how does
like
that
fun.
work? Do you describe it
So
and
yeah,
it
you
creates?
just go to Mid-Journey or any AI tool and just do your best to get the prompt correct, and just type in whatever you saw in your dream, and be like, try and do it, like think visually, like how you would want to
Yeah.
produce a visual image for whatever it is, and then just try your best to create one. And oftentimes you'll create something that's pretty damn close to your dream, which is pretty cool.
I haven't used this thing yet. Is that you just subscribe to that, I assume?
It's on
You haven't,
Discord, yeah. So
Yeah.
you haven't used Midjourney?
Mid-Journey's the most
Mm. I've
most
seen it, but I haven't used it.
powerful. I think it's still at this point the best text to image generator that there is. Yeah, you can do it in ChatGPT too if you have ChatGPT, or if you're using it.
Yeah, Midjourney's still, last time I messed around with it, definitely better than Dolly. Is it on ChatGPT?
Dolly's on ChatGPT, yeah.
Yeah.
Midjourney just seems to be more finely tooled, and it has better results. Yeah.
Let me ask you guys this. So we've been talking about, fitness and strength and masculinity. And then Rob, you were talking about, well, we've been talking about religion and Christ and this resurgence and stuff. And, you see the memes on Twitter where it's like the crazy woke person with all their bizarre symbols and stuff. And then it's just like the Jack Chad with the cross and, like, how can I serve you, king, or something like that. And Rob, you were saying earlier, like part of the something that people seem to be doing, and part of the religious path, I guess, is to mimic Christ, right? I think you said that, a little bit earlier. But how do you reconcile that Christ was not only someone, and the apostles and the early followers of Christ, one preached effectively poverty. And the notion there is that, you should be so identified and elevate Christ so much in your life that, material goods have very little value to you. But also that Christ allowed himself to be oppressed, tyrannized, murdered by the state, and so, because all of this religious stuff is so dependent on interpretation, right? Like, how do you interpret the Bible or the Christ story or the Bhagavad Gita or Taoism or these things? Like, because that's what you get from it, right? And is your interpretation accurate? And of course, a lot of ink has been spilled over this over the years, like, especially in the Christian faith, or at least I'm more familiar with that. Like, man, the history of Christian theology, from Christian mysticism to, debates about the Trinity and all this kind of stuff, are like, there's a lot of smart people have been trying to figure out how should we interpret, or how should one interpret this either historical event or mythical story. And so my question is like, why is it that in interpreting the story of someone who basically renounces possessions and allows himself to be killed by the authority, is inducing a strength and a masculinity and, basically a fortitude to stand up to that very same thing?
It would first of all be very presumptuous for me to even pretend like I had a really good answer, but I will what I've personally gotten in my life from just reading, like you said, a lot of ink has been spilt about this. Other people spilt ink about the life of Christ, has been useful to me. Like just trying to navigate my day-to-day quandaries, or like whatever situation I'm dealing with, like how to respond, how to act, what to do next, how to structure my day. And so I could just like talk about a few of those books. I guess one, I keep talking about Mimetic Desire, which was Rene Girard's book, Things Hidden Since the Foundation of the World. That book really fucking changed me. I don't know if you guys have read that one yet, but it's
No.
crazy. It's
I'm quite familiar with it.
he starts with
What's
an
crazy about it?
anthropology. He starts in it's 3 books in one, basically. It's anthropology. Then he goes into, I think he goes into theology in the second book, and then it's like Freudian inter-individual psychology at the end. And his thesis is that human interaction is inherently imitative, that we're always imitating one another. That's how kids learn. That's how we program each other. That's why we become the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. The word, and so he calls it mimetic desire. But if you look at, and he basically assigns this impulse to the foundation of all social institutions, religion, etc. Very complicated book. But when you go into a word like, I think the more colloquial term for this would be jealousy, actually. And jealousy has a very negative connotation, but I think social animals are, I don't want to say jealous, but we are definitely imitative, right? When we see someone doing something and it's working for them, well, it's like, what are you doing? In business, what do people do, right? It's if something is working, if TikTok releases all these new features, then 2 days later, Instagram has all these new features, right? We're constantly mirroring one another's behavior at like basically every level. And so you look at the etymology of the word jealousy, and you find that it's connected to the word zeal, like religious zeal. And so I find that has been insightful to me when I am thinking about who my role models are, who I'm trying to become. Like you're actually programming yourself in the books you read, obviously in the motions you take at the gym every day and the movements you make. But that patterning occurs at every level, right? It's physical, it's emotional, it's spiritual, etc. So that's one angle on it. And that's where I think it's very interesting to look at Bitcoin through that lens too, because I think people basically imitate whatever wealth acquisition strategy is working. And so Bitcoin presumably puts us into a world where wealth acquisition becomes much more a product of mutual consent rather than confiscation, basically, making rather than taking. So I'm excited to see how the incentive landscape change of Bitcoin permeates through people through mimetic desire or imitation, if you want to say it more broadly. The other book that was really foundational for me was Inventing the Individual. The author argues that like pre-Christ, we didn't have the individual as the primary social and legal unit. We had the paterfamilias, which is like the patriarchy, basically, right? Dad was in charge of every household, and he could do whatever he wanted. He could kill his daughter in the streets, and that was perfectly legal. But post Christ, we had this conception of the individual in a moral sense and a legal sense, and the book goes through that whole chain of events. And did Christ let himself be killed? I don't know. I don't know. I guess that's open to interpretation. It's sort of like I see the guy that was meeting. This is what archetypal stories do, right? It's like the worst, one extreme meets another extreme, basically. So the ultimate betrayal, the ultimate brutality, the ultimate cruelty is met with compassion, acceptance, truth, etc. And so it almost doesn't matter for me. And again, I'm not trying to push this on anyone. It's like just seeing that pattern of action in that story is helpful for informing what actions I'm going to take, right? When I come to a moral crossroads, you can just, I don't know, you reflect upon the stories you read about the guy and you decide what's the right thing to do, right? This is the big word we're typically looking for. I think most people want to do the right thing, by the way. You know, Plato said like, oh, everyone does what they think is good, even when it's evil, right? They think, oh, whatever I'm doing now is better than what I could have been doing, even if it's perceived as evil for someone else. So like, we're all oriented towards the good or the right, something like that. But it's a matter of sorting out who the best exemplars actually are for that model. And I think Christ is just the story. And I'm not saying he's the only one, right? We also have Buddha. We also have, there's all these Christic stories that precede Christ. There's the prophet, you know, there's all these stories. I'm not saying he's the only one, but just for me as a kid that grew up in Tennessee, it's the most accessible one. And, you know, frankly, Peterson got me really interested in it. And the more I read about it, the more my life improves. So that's kind of how I come out. I don't know if
it
that
goes
answers
back to
your question.
that. Well, yes, I mean, it's your answer, but it goes back to that question, like, which is the spirit that's most guiding you? Because I agree, like all the people that we like to point to as like the bad guys in society, the Davos crowd, the dark cabal, the bankers, whatever. Like, I think most of them, I think it's a very rare individual that thinks they're being evil and attempts to do evil, right? But I think it's more so like the path to hell is paved with good intentions, and those good intentions are defined by the spirit that's most guiding you, right? And this is, again, back to this discussion about like the importance of the religious enterprise. Like societies long ago, pre-writing, realized like it's really important to meditate and to think about that question, because what we put in the center of our society, what the animating spirit most is, will determine our actions. And if it's not properly aligned, right, if it's not aligned with what is actually most real, the order that is most fundamental, it's going to destroy us. We're going to destroy ourselves. And I think, you know, that those people that are doing evil but thinking they're doing good, it's a matter of being animated by the wrong spirit. And so, you know, again, I think this is why, as the chaos emerges in the world, like people are getting the subconscious, you know, suggestion like, hey, the animating spirit is off. You need to get back to the right one. And you know, maybe it's not Christianity, or again, like there's so many interpretations of that. What does that even mean? But there's like, at least there's a recognition like, oh, we need to put focus on the animating spirit again. We need to try to figure out what that is. I need to bring it into my life and orient my behavior, because that's the only way that we contend and reconcile this chaos.
Amen to that. And I don't know
self-custody and why we need to do it.
Yeah, I don't know much about these other religions at all, but one of the things I have heard, so this is secondhand, but like the first thing the Prophet Muhammad did was free a slave, right? It's like one of his first acts. So there are many exemplars of this type of behavior that are just pointing us towards, hey, man, be consensual. Don't be a dickhead, right? Just let people own stuff. It's so almost Darwinian in a way, right? Like I always joke about private property rights. If you don't believe in them, go hit a beehive with a stick. It's in us, right? Like 2-year-olds know if you take their thing away, they get mad. We're just trying to figure out how to actually honor that principle at scale. And it's kind of mind-blowing that it's so difficult to get us to do it, but I guess we're constantly wrestling with the temptation of, you know, taking someone else's stuff, basically, taking the shortcut.
Or we're finally trying to resolve that like at scale in its final form, which like it turns out that like nation state governments are like really good at the organizational structure of like getting a stick and hitting you with it to like get money. Like so much so that the entire economic structure of the world for generations upon generations has been built upon this very thing. And so
Necessarily
behold,
though, right? Because pre Bitcoin, the person that preserves your property right is the same one that can revoke it, and that's the temptation.
Nah. I mean, I think it was with the failure of the gold standard that like really started to unravel. We could like debate this probably all day. But
Mm.
yeah, like I think after like the crisis that was World War II that never actually ended, sort of unfolded. Yeah, like humanity was like trapped in this like pretty maniacal and fucked up game from which there was no exits at all, which is again why it's sort of so uh profound that like Bitcoin at the bottom of this sort of was like, boop. Like turns out that like the only way that you could have solved this problem of like radical global scale theft is like with a magic internet money that has proof of work embedded at the bottom of it that's protected by the most advanced military algorithm for securing. That could be.
There's this great tweet by Niraj that says, I'm sorry that your warrantless surveillance regime was built on the assumption that people would always need intermediaries to transact. It's like, yeah, it's like the world was clearly headed in this direction, and Bitcoin just came out of fucking nowhere as a Deus Ex Machina and was like, nah, bitch, we run it back turbo the other direction. You know?
It sort of is that exactly. It's just like this machine descends from heaven. It's like, check it out. I'm here to resolve the storyline. You're like, really? Like I thought this just like ended in Holocaust and like with us in the
Yeah.
gulag. But like, no, it's like spacesuits and
And then
big
it
titty bitches
and
for
it
everyone.
sucked us all in. Like we weren't gonna do digital money with our lives. None of us were on that trajectory. It just sucked us in. It was like, now you're doing digital money, and we were like, fuck yeah, let's do it.
Well, that's the
Well,
best part about Bitcoin
saved
is that it
us.
just like appropriates you. It's just like, yeah, you're like a Bitcoiner now, and this is the
Yeah.
thing that you do and advocate for, and like it's going to become the preeminent thing in your life, and you don't
It's
have a choice.
it's Rocco's Basilisk, right? Where it's like, you either help me do this or you get punished forever. Choose.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, I'll help. Yeah. Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
It's
And I'm
just
like, thank
it's
God
just
I'm
this
helping
this
by the time they embedded information that can like never be eradicated. Jesus Christ, that would
Yeah.
have been bad.
it's just the spirit of the good compelling you in a different way. Same, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like in the world of darkness, where like it seems to be that like evil and wicked and darkness is like all wholly victorious, this like idea of the good thing happening, to like have it actually like pop up in front of you and be like, hey, check it out, I'm like the good, follow me, and
Save
I'll
your
like
like,
liberate
if you will.
Yeah, like I'll save your life and liberate you from fiat slavery. All you gotta do is follow me. And it's like, uh, it's like pretty
Well, that's
dark
why
out here. There's like a lot of really bad shit going on. It's like, yeah, I know. That's why it's a good thing I showed up. So you
Just
coming?
come
And you're like,
toward the light, Eric.
yeah.
that's why
Fuck yeah,
so
I'm
many
coming.
people are so skeptical of it, right? And like when we go around extolling the virtues of it, people are super skeptical of us because, and of course they would be, because it sounds fucking insane. We're like, dude, there's this digital money. It was created by this random Japanese guy nobody's ever seen or heard from, and it will change your life. That's the dumbest sales pitch.
It's the classic sounds too good to be true, but then the paradox is that it's like the ultimate truth. It's like literally a
It
truth
is
machine.
true. Yeah.
Yeah,
This
I
whole
get
thing
lost
for
in it too
me,
much.
It's too truthful to be bad. Maybe that's the
For
way to
sure.
put it.
my big question that it begs for me is how deterministic are incentives on the shape of our society?
Damn
So
it,
like we
Rob, I
mentioned
wanted you to
gold.
say what is money.
Well,
Another way of saying that, maybe.
and
Wait,
you can find out
say
every
it
week
again,
on
Rob?
Rob's podcast, available on YouTube.
But what did HODL just say? Who did you quote? You said you just assumed that the world was always going to need intermediaries to transact. Well, yeah, in
Oh,
a
yeah.
world of gold, you need that shit. So then you get a very political, very contentious, very, cunning sort of world where all the power is centralized in one place, and we have these big institutions to scale the damn thing. And the pinnacle of that is the nation state. Well, how much does Bitcoin change that? I don't, like, it's an outstanding question for me. Like, I guess we can't know until we see it work, but
Yeah.
that would there's a weird thing between kind of human freedom and how much we are just shaped deterministically by incentives.
Yeah.
I mean, I believe we
Well,
have individual freedom, but the broader shape of society seems to kind of imitate the money in a way.
It does.
what
Culture
I-
rolls downhill from monetary policy, in my opinion. I think it's hard to unsee that once you see it,
Yeah, so gold
That's
can
what-
be gotten by violence, so therefore we live in a violent world, in a world run by gold.
Yeah.
And Bitcoin.
That's kind of what I
is
meant
not
by my
run by violence.
response to Eric a few minutes ago. Basically, just that, you know, we always needed rulers for rules, and those rulers manifested all those institutions of control. And whether it was a conscious trade-off or just one that manifested, like, go back in time, you know, early sedentary agriculturalists, and, you know, social hierarchy is beginning to form or is beginning to harden, and writing certainly accelerates that. But it's basically like, hey, like, if you live in this society where the authority sanctions transactions, standardizes methods, like all the things that allows you to actually get more out of your labor, out of your property, you like leverage it more in the sense that like it's more useful to you. That's a type of freedom. And you're giving up a type of freedom by saying, by submitting to a certain rule set. But the calculus is, I'm getting more freedom through that leveraged property than I am giving up. And so it's a good trade. And the societies that made that trade were the ones that proliferated and succeeded. Now, obviously, anytime you have a hierarchy of power and authority, it's corruptible, because as we said before, like, the same power that sanctions your trades and protects them can revoke that access and can, you know, take them from you. And so history is replete with those examples. But it would seem that up until, you know, 2009, there was no other option. And so people had to make this trade between what they got by submitting to authority versus what they had to give up. And to your point, Rob, now that we have a form of property, and the most concentrated form of property, let's say, that doesn't require, you can opt into a rule set, or you're bound to a rule set without the susceptibility to corruption by a particular ruler that's enforcing them, then all the vestiges of that authority that had to be erected to execute that authority and control, again, which had a benefit and also had a downside, now, theoretically, a lot of that goes away. And so over time, you know, as this plays out, what does society and culture and civilization come to look like, when previously the thing that was most central to it, which was the authority structure that propagated and upheld rules and all the attendant, you know, corruptibility that came with that, what happens when that's no longer, or it's way, way, way diminished, right? There'll still be property that needs protecting, let's say, but as I think we would all agree, that the vast majority of wealth will funnel into the place where it's most efficient to protect and most easy to use, and sequestered away from threat of theft or coercion or that kind of stuff. And so what happens to all those institutions that arose to facilitate those rules? What happens? And we shall see. Or maybe we won't, but
they'll be like,
maybe the
gee,
world.
gosh darn, we lost. All right, guys, like pack it up. Like these guys won. They figured it out. So, you know, sorry.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, like, if you take a broader like chunk of history, like you take 20,000 year, 10,000 year time frame rather than just, you know, our own slice, then it's the imperatives of authority playing out. And prior to Bitcoin, the imperatives of authority were different and came with all their baggage. And post Bitcoin, you know, it's a different set of factors, right? And I'm sure there'll be baggage with that too. But the necessity for rulers to enforce rules doesn't seem to be a part of that.
So did you see this interview with Harari recently? It was a clip that went viral on Twitter. I'm sure some of you guys saw it, where he was basically saying that, you know, he doesn't like Bitcoin because the story of Bitcoin is a fundamentally distrustful story, and he would like a currency that's based on trust, and we should basically, you know, trust Big Daddy government to create this currency for us, and yada, 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 right? And by the way, Harari is the classic intellectual who has cozied up to power structures and tells them exactly what they want to hear. And I think that should be obvious to anybody who, you know, is paying attention to his work. But just to like sort of steelman what he's saying is like, I can see where one would come to the conclusion, because it's a pretty surface level conclusion, that a currency that has distrust as a foundational principle is going to create a distrustful society, right? So that's sort of the thing that people might levy against Bitcoin. And in my opinion, nothing could be further from the truth, because I think that, you know, it's sort of like good fences make good neighbors, or like an armed society is a polite society, right? Like and it's back to Rob's point that he's always hammering, which is like, if we respect each other's property, it's more of an enforcement mechanism that like fundamentally we must distrust each other in order to then build bonds of trust so that we can get it. Also like dovetails back on the like teenage scammer kids that we were talking about at the very beginning of the interview, which is like, maybe in the world of Bitcoin there is a even more coercive element. So, you know, people are trying to social engineer the fuck out of you to get your Bitcoin, right? And like social engineering at like mass scale, you know, via algorithm, via media manipulation, via propaganda, psyops, via
Torture.
you know, fraud, right? Like all those things. And you know, to me, you're going to have to start at the place of distrust, because in an information world, we're moving into that world anyway, right? And so we might as well have a currency that's able to more easily resist those things, even if your human mind that's been honed on millennia of living in small societies and trusting other individuals is not in fact, that's the reason we do need it, is because we as human biological animals are not equipped for that. We are equipped to trust others in our small units. And that's how these people are going to scam us, is by preying on that like outdated hardware, essentially.
And you know what else has a foundation of distrust? Fucking science, logic, argumentation, mathematics, the rule of law, the US Constitution. Like, this whole thing has been about how do we navigate around the fallibility, corruptibility, and demagoguery of the fucking individual, right? It's like, how we need to build these hierarchies, but we have to be careful about who we put on top, and we have to hold them in check. And the United States, again, the US Constitution, I think, is the greatest success story in that respect prior to Bitcoin, I think. I mean, maybe there's something else. English common law, I guess you could say, maybe, which is before US, obviously. But these open source, decentralized network archetypes, like, these are the things that actually function because they're built on distrust, right? You're not trusting any, and it's not just trust me, bro, it's going to work. It's like, no, we need to not trust, verify. That's why, you know, again, science, all of these things. And
this word distrust, I feel like distrust is one of those weird double speaky words, because like there's some weird negative connotation with it. And because like we're not speaking about distrust, we're talking about like verifying your proof. Like if that is true, you should be able to prove it. And if you can prove it, you have a proof of work. And if you have a proof of work, I can duplicate it. And if I can duplicate it, I can also do it. If I can also do it, that means I can continue to track it. And like that's kind of like, so like download the time chain and you're like up to speed on what the block height is. And like now you can do the same thing. Like you don't need to trust me anymore. You can just verify it for yourself and you'll see that it's valid. I will have actually proven it to you like all the way down. Whereas all other
example. Oh, sorry.
No,
go ahead, I just say a good example of this is like the world that we're building, you know, based on public-private key cryptography, is that basically like AI verification, you know, they can now call you as your daughter and be like, I've been kidnapped, I'm in Mexico, whatever. And you are going to have to be like, okay, what's the fucking password, sweetie? And, you know, she's going to have to sign cryptographically. That's something that we've been doing for years in Bitcoin that everybody's going to have to get used to, you know, pretty soon.
Yeah, that's a scary prospect, isn't it? Man, like discerning. I mean, it's the same thing, right? You're trying to discern truth from falsehood, right? That's kind of what trust is. Like someone sends you a message or manages your money, like you want to know that they're sending you what they say they're sending you, or what you expect to receive, not something else. And you know, with AI and all this stuff, like there's going to be the potential for like an illusory world that seems perfectly real, and separating the real from the artificial is going to be just important, I guess.
Just to
I think Eric's point. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to finish what kind of John was saying. Like I think all these political power structures have always been necessary, I guess I'll use that word, to preserve private property rights or enforce the rules. But those rules have always been revocable and arbitrary, right? They're kind of at the whims, more or less, to the guy or guys in power. And so Bitcoin is like this first rule system we've had that is damn near irrevocable, right? You can't put a guy in power that will change it. It's decentralized in a very powerful way. So to have purchasing power that's defended by physical power over a digital network in a system that's resistant to the arbitrariness of that political power. Like that's the big rug pull on the world in a way. It's like all of a sudden we can opt into this game that is just better for every player that opts into it. And actually, the sooner you opt in, the more you benefit. So there's a crazy black hole effect to it.
And that's what I think all these noticers that we were talking about earlier, like this groundswell of people that are just started to pop their head up and be like, hold up, what's going on? Like that is the ultimate conclusion that I think they have to come to as a way to address the thing, the problems that they're perceiving. And then it just exponentially kind of builds on itself. And the more people that do that, the more it actually is that solution to the problems that they're perceiving.
Yeah.
I would say I see Eric's eyebrows raising, and I know he is always sensitive to asserting any sort of legitimacy to the apparatus of the state. But if not, these arbitrary power structures being necessary, because that's kind of a loaded word, I would say they were just evidently advantageous, right? Like throughout the story of civilization, the people that adopted them, these hierarchical systems of authority, better or worse, they just took over the other ones. Like we can imagine that there was many like kind of flat egalitarian, trust-based or faith-based societies in the pre-writing era in the Mediterranean and the Fertile Crescent, etc. And then a hierarchical society rocks up on them one day with their king and their armies and stuff, and they're like, hey, what's up? Like all that gold and barley and all that surplus capital that you got there, that looks really sweet. Can we have that? And they'd be like, oh no, we don't do that here. Everything's consensual. And they're like, great, I'm going to kill you now and take it. And that's what happens. And so again, maybe necessary, I don't know. Advantageous, definitely. And that's why it's so amazing that we have a system of authority around property now that can be advantageous or is advantageous without the necessity to exact force on people, right? So people can put their surplus capital, their wealth in a place where they don't incentivize that hierarchical structure of authority to come and take it from them, or at least to the extent that they do incentivize it, it's way harder to get at it, right? This is the logic of violence sort of argument. So it's such an enormous detail. It's like kind of, or enormous deal. It's hard to wrap your head around it because through that lens, I mean, civilization is that authority hierarchy being used to structure society and to sanction property and all that. Like that's the story of civilization. And now it may be different.
I mean, in all honesty, like I'm like a pretty hard disagreement that like that was the beginning of the eugenics project to like cage in humanity to like make the kind of cattle that we are.
What was the beginning? What was the beginning? When?
Like when Christendom started its imperialist campaign that like showed up to like these indigenous societies.
Yeah, but I'm talking
like,
way earlier than Christendom. I'm talking 4,000 BC, 6,000 years ago, even agriculture, 10,000, 12,000 years ago.
Okay. Like I think that was the start of this yogic cycle that we're like coming into the end to, because now we're at the most hyper extreme forms of that authoritarianism, and so that like it's pretty clear to me that the same structure like lended and led itself to a place where like there's now a man that, what did you say, he sunsets in the Oval Office earlier? Is that the terminology?
Yeah.
He sunsets himself. So he sunsets himself and like shits his pants and like
sundown. He's sundown.
He's sundown. Thank you. Sun's down and shits his pants. Like this is actually a person that could start a nuclear war and destroy all of humanity. Like that's like a real fact. Okay, so like I'm sorry if I don't accept it at face value if you tell me how great it is that I live in a world where a man who doesn't know where he is.
I didn't say it was great, you fuck. I said it was advantageous up until 2009.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. I mean, like, I don't know, like this is one of the things that blows my mind is like how is it that we're like this? How is it this stupid at this point in time that like you're literally like 3 recursive questions away from somebody just glitching out to where they're like, they're like, I'm a great liberal and I support freedom and peace. And it's like, that's like a Ukraine shirt you're wearing, right? And they're like, yeah. And it's like, well, isn't like a war against anybody like a bad war? And they're like, no, because like Putin's evil. And I'm like, yeah, but like there's like blood on your hands by like financing one side that like innocent people die. And they're like, not Nazi. And I'm like, what? So I don't know.
Eric had me thinking about Stanley Kubrick.
I'll interrupt you. I just want to say, talking to you guys is good for me because, like, one, it helps me. Because, like, a lot of times I just go in this place where, like, I'm crazy. Like, I'm just a crazy person, you know? And, like, I'm that other crazy people. And then, like, reconnecting with you guys, it helps me, like, turn around and be like, oh, no, like, the whole world is fucking retarded. Like, it's not me, it's them. They're actually that
First of all, you gotta remember the Krishnamurti quote. It's no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. So let that be your guide. Be like, okay, so I shouldn't be well adjusted to this. So some craziness is completely warranted. And then focus on all the good, optimistic, integrating, hopeful stuff. And you're good.
Dude, it's so funny that like I was thinking when Eric was going on that rant that like Stanley Kubrick was gonna make Doctor Strangelove into a drama, and then he decided that the bureaucrats that run our society having control of nuclear weapons was the most preposterous thing ever, so it became a comedy. And like, dude, just it's like that thing you just said, Eric. Like, imagine trying. That's such a true thing, and imagine trying to explain that to somebody who's like, "Did you catch the game last night?" Like, that the man in charge of all the nuclear weapons shits his pants. It's like the craziest thing.
No, I mean, if you can let that realization just overwhelm you, obviously, right? There's so many things in the world that you almost it would be rational to let it overwhelm you. The fact that, you know, how many, you know, hot button issue, of course, but how many children have been killed in Gaza in the last year or however long the war's been going on for? Like, you shouldn't be able to just say 20,000, what's for lunch? Like, that's not, you know, there's something profoundly sick and wrong with that. But you're confronted with the question, well, what are you going to do? Like, are you going to mourn and sob and, you know, just be uncontrollable grief because of that? Because it's warranted, but that, you know, that's not a productive response for you, right? That's not going to do anything, one, to rectify that situation ever, and it's only going to destroy you. So like there's a million things in the world and throughout history that have been like that should, you know, like, you know, Biden having his finger on the red button, that, you know, like, you shouldn't be able to contain the anxiety that induces in you, but you have to, because you can't do anything about that. But there are a set of things that you can do something about that are within your realm of control that might, if enough people do them, and if the winds of fate blow in the right direction, might actually move away from that scary scenario or those tragic scenarios in the future. That's the only thing that we can do and control. And not to say, like, if you want to be involved in the political process, you know, absolutely, like, go for it, especially if you're a good, virtuous person and you think you can have an impact that way. But like, I guess the point is, there's a million things that could cause you to fall into a black hole of your own stress, anxiety, fear, you know, and all that kind of stuff. But you have to find the light, and you have to follow the light. And that being your focus is the only way to move through a world that is just full of tragedy.
It's true.
Well, shouldn't we talk about like Bitcoin at some point in time? Isn't there? It's like up. It's down.
This is all about.
I think it's going up, man. Personally, still hodling it.
If you look at my chart, you can see that Sagittarius is in alignment with a Corneus and triangulate. Okay, I don't know.
Speaking of Biden, I can bring this back to Bitcoin. So SBA 121 passed the House and the Senate. This is the bill that would allow the banks to custody crypto assets. And Biden has already threatened to veto it. He has not vetoed it yet. The bill is not veto proof, but I think he is going to veto it. And then maybe it might go back and garner some more votes, whatever. We'll see. But it's interesting to me that the state can't figure out how to deal with Bitcoin. Like, the USG has no cohesive strategy for how it's going to approach the Bitcoin problem as they see it. And it seems like half of the powers within the state want to bring Bitcoin in so that they can co-opt and control it. And half of the powers structure of the state wants to keep Bitcoin out. And there's this tension where they don't know which one is the right one to do. And so, you know, for me, I look at like a bill like SBA 121 failing, and I'm like, good, let it fail. Like, who gives a shit? Like, we already have self-custody. We don't need the banks to custody Bitcoin, right? That just makes it easier to co-opt and control. So to me, it's like if I was attempting to co-opt and control Bitcoin, I think it's a bad decision to veto that bill. But I don't think they understand the game that they're playing, and so they think it's a good decision to veto that bill. You know, and it's interesting to watch this sort of tension play out, and people get it wrong because they're operating with, you know, outdated mental models.
Harry Ann has posted a video that said Congress voted to nullify SAB 121. I don't know what that does. That mean they got rid of it? I don't know.
Oh wait, I didn't see that.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
The
Go ahead, Rob.
I was going to say the other thing that I saw that was interesting on that front was this guy just introduced a bill to abolish the Fed in the House.
It'll just sweep
lost
right
track
through.
of
It'll
it
pass.
already.
Good luck.
Yeah.
I support that bill. I support it.
Oh, it's Thomas Massie introduced in the Fed
Yeah.
Federal
There you
Reserve
go.
Board Abolition Act, HR 8421.
See, like, what if there was 50 Thomas Massies? Then you'd really be getting somewhere. That would be great.
Yeah, Thomas
Right?
Massie seems pretty libertarian, right?
Yeah, I mean, anything I've seen of him, he's super on point.
Yeah.
He's voting against like the bullshit warrantless money to whomever stuff, and he's trying to defend gun rights, and he's trying to, I think he was behind a farm bill that just, you know, basically allowed like farmers to sell to consumers directly and not have to, you know, raw milk wouldn't be illegal, that kind of stuff. So he seems pretty sensible. But he's like one of the only ones, as far as I can tell, in Congress. And if there was more, then, you know, maybe you're not going to totally fix the issues of corruption in that system of authority, but it'd certainly be better to have some sane people contributing to it.
We just need a radical third party that's all about, just like any association with the Republican or Democratic Party, like you're fundamentally an enemy of the people, and we're going to put you on trial for treason, like when we get into power.
So
it's like very clear.
Are you an RFK Jr.? Oh, I mean, you're not going to vote, but what do you think of his candidacy?
I like RFK a lot for various reasons. I'm sickened by his position in Israel, along with some other things that I find highly confusing, like why it seems that his VP candidate, who was most likely an intelligence officer and most likely handling him, is there. But if he's being handled, that makes a lot of sense, which makes sense across the board. RFK seems like an amazing candidate to run to get all of your fringe conspiracy people to get out all of their rah-rah, so that when it comes time to get in line and vote for Biden, we'll be like, we did all that we could to resist evil Trump. We can't let that happen. Like, I just think this whole thing is a gigantic charade at this point in time, because if people, like, think of how absolutely ass-ream fucking raped we get, like, on a daily basis, that we just get hammer fucked out and told that it's normal. Like, it is so despicable and fucking insane across the board. And just like just the rogue corruption across the board through all fucking government agencies, and the general nihilism that's just like, yeah, it's just like what it is, you know? Yeah, like I gotta pay 80% of my taxes to the government, and they hate me. And because I'm a white male, like I'm a fucking piece of shit that is out there spreading the hate of the far-right neo-Nazi idea of Bitcoin. Like, fuck these people. This whole thing fucking sucks. Like, I can't believe that we're doing this embarrassment. Because, like, I know when I die, like, Plato's gonna just be like, still laughing. He's like, oh my God. He was like like you in the supermarket in 2020 with the mask on. Feels like you thought that guy sneezed is gonna kill you. You know, like, it's all, like, this is so fucking embarrassing across the board. And like, I just want my far-right fascist candidate that I can like fully fucking support, because he's just going to kick these people's teeth in when he gets into power. And like, I used to want something different, but at this point in time, like, I just want blood. You know, like these people, what they have done is so deplorable and disgusting and horrendous and frankly treasonous. Like I can't believe that nobody has been brave enough to stand up and fight these people. And I guess that just speaks to the times.
I
Yeah,
feel
but
like
By the way, sorry.
go.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, speaking about RFK, I have brain worms is probably the funniest way I've ever seen a candidate disqualify themselves for their office. That's like it's a crazy thing to say. You know?
That was weird. But yeah, to just to respond to Eric's point first, like Tulsi actually said this to us in the context of like political engagement, which I'm not necessarily on board with, you know, to each their own. But like to your point, Eric, like you can't give up and go down the want revenge route, because that's just self-perpetuating forever. Like I get it, you know, like I totally get it. You know, so there's one element of that focusing. What you just said is just another example of the thing that's supposed to drive you crazy, just like the dying children in Gaza. But you can't let it consume you. This is the whole, like, this circles back to the spiritual aspect of this, what's going on today that we were talking about. Like that frustration, angst, anger, desire for revenge, desire for blood, like everyone, a lot of people feel that. But I think the responsibility is to transmute that into something that is creative and generative and sustainable, despite the fact that it may be deserved and, you know, like all the things, but is acting in that or reacting in that way, perpetuating a cycle that's just going to ensure that the same thing happens again and again and again and again. Like we have to construct solutions that try to address more eternally, let's say, or at least for longer periods of time, the problems that we ourselves are complaining about. Because any, you know, like, yes, you construe whomever as the oppressors, but if your fascist guy gets in and he starts oppressing people, they construe him as their oppressors and they want his blood eventually. And it's tit for tat forever. You know, so just the urge for that type of response or that type of solution has to be overcome. And we have to seek other solutions to our issues, in my opinion.
I agree with that.
Rob had a funny-
I feel like we talk about this every time we talk, like the whole, like, you know, get the pitchforks versus the peaceful revolution.
I think we
Well,
do.
it's the infinite blood feud versus the, you know, the Christic revelation, right? Bitcoin. This is why I think Bitcoin gets compared to Christ in so many ways. It's like you needed this revelation that this is how we are, right? And we can't even change it ourselves. We've come a long way, but we actually need a material incentive, a tool to get us to go the right direction. And so, yeah, otherwise you're just in endless blood feuds, right? It's always that's what human history is. You just walk it back, and it's always someone killed someone, took someone's shit ad infinitum, right? It's an infinite regress of horror and bloodshed.
Take the conflict in Gaza right now. It's a perfect example.
Yeah,
they killed
yeah,
us, we killed them, they killed us, we killed them, all the way up, and it scales up every
They're
time.
fighting. They're fighting in some instances about things that happened 1,000 years ago. You know,
Right.
and it is true that, like, if you've ever had like family trauma, which, you know, a lot of us do, unfortunately, and it sucks, but if you're going to be the one that is going to fix it, you have to stand and bear the burden of it on your own, right? And that is like the Christ-like thing to do, is to, you know, turn the other cheek and basically say, yeah, something wrong happened to me, and I'm not going to take revenge on this person, or I'm not going to spread it to other people. I'm just going to bear it myself, and I'm going to suffer through it on my own. You know?
That might be a good answer to the question that I asked Rob earlier, because I don't know if you were here or not, HODL, but it was basically like, why does Christ invoke this sense of like strength and formidability, even though his story is one of like not fighting back against oppression?
Right.
And maybe like, and to the point I made earlier about like not focusing on all the things that would drive you crazy, but going towards the light, maybe part of the reason is to go towards the light requires a tremendous amount of strength, right? To resist the urge to go into your revenge, to go into your trauma, to try to get one back, like all that, you know, to focus on the good and to conform yourself to it requires a tremendous amount of strength. And maybe that's why the light that is Christ invokes or incentivizes the generation of strength in an individual, because it's required to align yourself with it.
That's
To be
interesting.
clear, I don't just want like a pure bloodletting. Like what I want is the rigid institutionalization of the law as it is actualized, because to be clear, like the law has clearly and radically been broken by these people. Like they clearly are performing crimes that they will not be held accountable for. And like that's the thing I demand, is like make the goddamn law work how it's supposed to. And like whoever the hell can actually get that done on a mass scale against all these corrupt federal motherfuckers, like they got my support. And furthermore, that like I think that with the technological capacities and things that we have, I could be convinced for something similar to a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, where we have everybody come forward with the crimes that they had in exchange for some degree of immunity within it.
It's going to
Just a
be
quick
interesting
question.
times, because there are a lot of people who think that Donald Trump is about to do what Eric is talking about. A lot of people think that, you know.
Well, I want to touch on that, but I'm on a different time zone. So when you guys said 7:45, is that like 10 minutes from now, 8 minutes from now, or what?
Yeah,
Okay.
like 10. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say that the tit for tat that's going on in the using lawfare between political opponents in the mainstream political parties in America, it kind of ends in the direction that Eric is saying, and it's horrible. Like I don't want to live through it, but like that's just, it seems like we're just barreling towards that cliff, and there are no brakes on the car, and a lot of people think that they're just not going to relent, and then we're just going to prosecute every president from here on out forever, and maybe that's how our society like fully gridlocks and stops functioning. I don't know.
This is not going to be very, not many people are going to take solace in this, especially the ones that have been most egregiously injured by oppression and tyranny and dishonesty and corruption. But obviously, you're not going to catch all the bad guys. Some people will, get away without being noticed or without being punished for their crimes. But I do think I think it's, first of all, true, and that's the most important thing. But I think there has to be some degree of awareness and perhaps comfort as a result of that awareness, that people who engage in, broadly speaking, evil, their punishment is that. Like, being oriented by that spirit, engaging in those activities will cut you off from the vivifying, sustaining force of God or the good or whatever we want to call that. Like the punishment is immediate in that sense, that by behaving that way and orienting themselves that way, they won't ever develop a closer relationship with the higher order. And again, like I know that this is a long conversation which we don't have time for, about justice. Like how should we construe and execute justice? And so like executing justice through law in human affairs, that's not really what I'm talking about. This is more of a, like, you have to accept the fact that like some of the bad guys aren't going to get away. Some of the people that you'd like to see held accountable aren't going to be held accountable. And maybe it's some comfort to know that taking the actions that they did and being oriented in the way they are or were is going to mean that they don't have access to something that you do have access to, which is effectively the love and union with the higher order, with God, let's say, in my opinion. And so that gives me some comfort, because I know you're not going to catch all the bad guys and all the corrupt politicians and COVID era stuff and people that drop bombs and all the evil in the world. Like most of them are probably not going to be held accountable. And as HODL was just saying, like if you try, you're just going to get into a scenario where we're probably in now, at least in the US, where lawfare on one side, and then when the other side gets in, they get retribution through lawfare, and it keeps scaling up each time until, the divisiveness is such that everything just breaks apart. So I think there has to be some way that you rectify that internally that's not dependent on the legal system, the justice system, politics generally.
Mm.
And I think it's a faith-based approach that gets you there, basically.
Yeah.
I think it's fascism.
I don't think it's fascism. All right, last thing, because we talked about Trump, but I saw, I think David Bailey said they're trying to raise 100 million for Trump. I guess because I know they were helping RFK Jr. at the beginning, but I guess they picked their horse in the race. And like,
Well, RFK can't win, by the way. He can't win.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
all right, sure, fair enough.
Yeah.
But it's like, and I've heard some other Bitcoiners saying like, you know, Trump will be good for Bitcoin. And there's a, you know, the topic of Trump again, we don't have time for right now, but I feel like, well, one, a very wise man once said, don't put your faith in politicians, they'll only break your heart. And that was the one and only Michael J. Saylor. But you know, I feel like Trump's the ultimate pragmatist is probably the wrong word, but like if he gets in, for example, and 100 million from the crypto crowd helps him get in, and like an advisor comes into the Oval Office one day and be like, you know that like this is going to disrupt dollar hegemony, right? And it's going to be bad for us. And he'll be like, oh, I didn't consider it that way. I'll get rid of it. Like I feel like that's kind of how he operates. So I wouldn't put too much, and I'm not a Trump hater at all, but I don't know if putting that much faith and stock in him somehow being like uniquely beneficial for Bitcoin is that wise, let's say. What do you guys think about that?
If he's an
I
incredible
would-
pragmatist, as you say, maybe
He should be for it.
he would just front run the whole thing, or like he would realize what the dollar is and realize what Bitcoin is and just buy the shit out of it. Maybe.
Oh my
I really don't
God.
have a strong
Like,
view, but I'm just,
I want somebody to orange pill Trump and Trump to realize like this is his exit and how he keeps all of his wealth away from these people.
Yeah.
Prosecution and just like full front runs everything. Like speaks to the Bitcoin conference like I'm 100% Bitcoin. Bitcoin is going to be the U.S. curt like and just
I mean, it would be kind of poetic if the
throat.
orange man brought in the orange coin.
Orange
too.
man, orange coin. It's
Oh,
true.
man, brings in the orange revolution. Yeah, like who knows? Like shit's pretty wild. So like I could see Trump doing a total about face like that if somebody actually like orange pilled him hard and he got like how
True.
much it could help him.
yeah.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
guess he's kind of too unpredictable to really. I get maybe that's my point. It's like it's putting 100 mil behind someone is not, you know, it's a pretty big thing, and he's so unpredictable. You know, who knows if it's gonna
Yeah, I would say like
pay off.
you don't need to be in love with Trump, you know what I mean? But like pragmatically, I mean, the Biden administration is horrific for Bitcoin and Trump will probably be better. And it's like those are the two choices. It's between Biden and Trump. So
True.
and Biden
Well, when you
isn't
put it that
active-
way,
for
it's
pants.
when you
Yeah.
put it that way, it's kind of a no-brainer, of course. But
right. It's
I
pretty
just don't
obvious.
want pants pooping. That's all.
Exactly.
to ask
He's
for.
in active dementia. This man is in active dementia. It's cruel what they're doing. It's elder abuse what they're doing to him.
Thank you.
You know?
Thank you. Someone needed to say that.
of
It's
course,
true.
not only is it just crazy that they haven't like retired him from currently serving, but they're actually obviously trying to run him again. You know, like
Yeah.
you guys have probably had people in your life that had dementia, but my grandmother had it, and like the signs are obvious. Like you watch the guy walk, he
Mhm.
has like the quintessential like gait or walking
Mm.
style of someone who is like mid-stage dementia.
Mm.
And
guys-
it's just crazy that like everyone on that side is acting like it's not a thing. It's just
No
like
big deal.
it's
Yeah.
completely bonkers.
You guys realize that between Super Tuesday and the election, like it's literally the plot line of Weekend at Bernie's 3. Like it's
Yes.
just like he's dead.
Yeah.
They're like, we gotta mannequin him through his speech, and you know, it's the whole thing is just gonna be a nightmare.
All right. Well, I know some of you guys got to bolt now, so let's shut it down. But this was awesome. I know I always say it, but I wish we did more of them. But wrangling ourselves together is tough. So we'll be in touch, and we'll do another one. Maybe I don't know, before the election, after. We'll see.
Yeah,
Bro.
that's what I had before.
I hope the audience knows how hard it is to set these podcasts up. Like everyone's in a fucking different time zone, and like it's
Mostly
so
John's
hard,
fault.
man. Yeah.
John, you got to get back to this side of the world.
It is my fault this time. Yeah.
All right, my homie.
Anyways,
much love to you.
we'll talk again soon.
Peace
All
All
out.
right, man.
Love you guys. See ya.
Love you,
Peace,
bye.
friends.
Peace.